Alrighty, what is up? We are live. The critical podcast of 2021 is starting now. I have got my brother James Southworth. Probably because it's delayed and also you're behind. It's delayed by a lot.
There we go. There.
A lot. Okay. We are live with the critical podcast of 2021. I have my brother James Southworth, aka JS Reviews. I'm now switching to the critical podcast thing. You will see his Twitter up there. It's got a nice little circulating thing. So we're gonna get started right here, right now. And what do we usually do? Movies then music, or music then movies?
Here we can.
I think last year we did music into movies, so we'll just do it that way again, just to keep it consistent. We'll start out with our top 10 albums and songs of 2021, and obviously we're going to be sort of passing along the mic. I have a mic that requires being really close to the mouth, so when we talk, we'll talk more individually, but there will be times where we just talk and I'll just sort of flip the mic whenever between us. But I'll just start out. We're going to start out. We go from number 10 to number 1, and we do album and song number 10, and then album and song number 10, then back and forth all the way through. That's the way we do it, right?
I believe that's how we did it.
Yeah, that's how we do it. Yeah.
That makes
Yeah.
the most sense.
We'll do it that way anyways. I'm 95% sure that we did it that way.
You're right. I think we used number 10 song, number 10 song, number.
Yeah, I think it'll be very
more
easy
efficient.
for that. Yep. So I will start out with, as per the podcast, if this stupid freaking thing, oh my gosh, I hate everything. Okay, fine. This thing, Google Drive on mobile, might be the worst thing ever. Why? Okay, top 10 albums and songs of 2021. So I will start out with my number 10 album. I stayed in my lane for the most part this year. I know you venture out, but I stayed in my lane for the most part this year. My lane is mostly rock, metal, stuff like that. But I mean, for how weird and wacky this year was, I think it was a better year than last year for music. I don't know about you, but I think it was a way better, more consistent year for music overall.
Yeah.
In the metal genre especially, but in other, genres as well. Can't say that any other genres will ever make my list, but there was some good stuff even from mainstream that I liked sometimes, so can't deny it. But my number 10 album goes to a band that fell off for probably about 4 years, but this album came back for me strong, and it was Wage War, Manic. And I mean, this album was just sort of the default number 10. I liked it, not enough to make anywhere into my top echelon of movies, but it was enough to sort of get into the top 10. I thoroughly enjoyed the album overall. Definitely a really solid return to form for Wage War, who I probably at one point would have considered my favorite mainstream metal band, until I found Tool, but that's another story. So yeah, that is my number 10 album. I'll talk a little bit. I mean, like, overall, the album has a really strong opening half compared to the closing half, in my opinion. Like the first 5-6 songs, just all like Wage War bangers that you'd expect. The closing half a little bit weaker until the ending song, but overall it was a solid album, to say the least, very much. So yeah, that is my number 10 album. My number 10 song goes to a band that seems to always appear in my top 10s, and it has appeared this is a band that always appears somewhere in my top 10 songs, and that is Systematic by While She Sleeps, my favorite song from their new album. It's a little bit of one of their wilder songs. I've usually tended to prefer their more melodic stuff, but this one, it's just a fun song, and that's why it just lands in my top 10. It's just It was my favorite song to consistently listen to because it just has that crazy wild while she sleeps sounds that I just love so much. So it the at the beginning it's a little more simple explanations. As it goes on, it gets more and more complex why you love it so much, because the better songs tend to be more complex, so yeah. That's gonna be my top 10 stuff. Now I'll pass it on to James.
Okay. So like Joseph, I also agree that 2021 was a really good year for music. Possibly being even better than 2019, which I also thought was a great year for music. But there's just a lot of good stuff this year. And yeah, I do venture out more than Joseph probably does, but I will say that metal had a pretty strong year this year, so a lot of my picks will be staying in that genre as well, but there will be some other genres included in here as well. But metal and rock had very strong years this year, so that's where my top 10 was dominant for sure. So for my number 10 album, now, I wouldn't say this is their strongest album by any means. In fact, I would say that this is their weakest album, but I still really enjoyed it, and that goes to While She Sleeps for Sleep Society. I don't think this album is as good as So What or You Are We, but I hold both of those albums in very high regard. You Are We is probably one of my favorite albums of all time at this point, so that should tell you how much I love this band. This band almost missed my spots because there were other bands that released really strong albums this year, but still, the songs that I liked on this album I really liked, so it did end up getting a spot on my list. I think the album is just really strong overall. It sort of continues their themes of unity and togetherness and political intrigue that they've had on their past albums. I don't think this album has as strong of political messages as their past two did, but they still have some really good stuff to say here, and I appreciate the sort of back to the basics formula here, sort of going back to their roots of their older albums, while also updating their sound and probably making it even more accessible than it was on their past album. There's a lot of great songs on here. Nervous was originally a song I started out not caring for too much, but it just grew on me more and more over time. I just really like what that song does, and it talks about anxiety, a topic that While She Sleeps hasn't really tackled before. I think they do a good job. Know Your Worth. It sounds like exactly what it's about, pretty much. I think it's just a really positive, uplifting song, and it's just really fun musically. I still think this album shows just this band is incredibly talented in the music department. They do a lot of unique things in the metal scene that not many other bands are doing as well as them, I feel like. I just think they have a unique touch to them that I always appreciate. So yeah, through and through, this album was pretty great. And even if I don't consider it as strong as some of their others, I still really loved it. And now moving on to my number 10 song. Number 10, this is an artist that appeared back in 2019. He was a new artist at the time, and now he's back with his second album, which will also be appearing on my list later on. But this song is called Get You Down. It is by Sam Fender. I don't know if you remember me talking about him. Yeah. He's a guy who does a lot of classic rock type of sounds, but sort of updates it for a modern age, and I think his music really appeals to a younger, probably specifically millennial audience, probably people close to my age, which is probably why I connect to his music so much. He just has this quality where he's able to create music that I think creates a lot of connectivity and just sound-wise really works well for me. I think the classic rock sounds in this song are once again great. I think this might even be my favorite song by him now. It's just really solid all around. I really like what the lyrics are talking about and how he has been insecure in the past about his relationships, and because of that, that has led to him exhibiting toxic behavior, and he even admits in this song that he's let many people down, including himself, which I think is a really important message, that we need to let go of those toxic behaviors that we do to ourselves than we do to others. And of course, like with Hypersonic Missiles in 2019, which was one of my favorite songs of that year, this one incorporates the saxophone once again, and I absolutely love it.
Actually,
yes,
I remember that song now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, and the saxophone here, I think it's even better. I just love what it does. It's just so much fun. And probably one of my favorite things now in general is just when a saxophone is incorporated well in a song. I really always love hearing that. And I think he does an excellent job at it. You could compare him to the likes of Bon Jovi and shoot, I can't even think of his name now. It's escaping me. But a lot of classic acts like that. But I think he makes the sound his own, and I think he's just very talented. So yeah, that's my number 10 song.
All right, moving into number 9. Fortunately, my number 9 album won't require much from me because it follows very closely as it is also Sleep Society by While She Sleeps. I won't say much. I will just second what James said and move on. It was a good album. Not nearly as good as their last two, but it served its purpose for another just solid album from the band. So yeah, that was my number 9 album. James said everything, and I 100% agree with everything. So I have nothing to add. My number 9 song. This is a band I sort of just found in the last couple weeks, and songs grew on me. It's The Sun Sleeps As If It Never Was by Invent Animate. This is a sort of new band. They're in their, I think, sophomore and or first EP stage. And this is 2 songs combined into one. And it's hard to explain how good this song is, but it reminds me of before Thornhill decided to do whatever they decided to do.
Yeah.
And actually better. And it's 2 songs, sort of. But
It's technically 3. If you like an
yeah, I guess so. But yes, this was an excellent song. It just has a I kept on seeing it in my recommendations over and over again. I was like, all right, if I keep on seeing it, then obviously it's got to be something I like, and they were right. It's one of those sort of progressive songs that you listen to and it sticks with you for a while. It just has that really gut punchy emotional impact, and I really liked it overall. This has that great transition in between the songs. It's like you never even notice the transition. It's so well done. So yeah, that's my number 9 song and album as well.
All right. So for my number 9 album, I just talked about him, but it is Sam Fender and his album 17 Going Under. This is his sophomore release, and it's hard for me to say whether I like this one as much as Hypersonic Missiles. I think Hypersonic Missiles has a couple more huge standouts, and I think some more memorable songs, but I think 17 Going Under is a more consistent album in terms of sound and emotional arc and everything like that, because this album very much so feels like a sort of coming of age thematically album to me. Talks about a lot of different things, and I think Sam really nails talking about a lot of deeper topics here, such as spirituality, his own relationships, and things like that. There's a lot of powerful songs here that I really love. Already talked about Get You Down, but I would also point out The Dying Light, which sort of talks about suicide and just being there for those who need you the most. And Paradigms is a really haunting closer that really left me with some cold chills throughout. And I think the title track in this album is also great, just sort of being definitively what Sam Fender's sound and what he sounds like, but also doing an update with it that I really appreciate. And Spit of You is sort of a signature, very powerful Sam Fender track, one that seems to be a fan favorite, and I can see why. Whereas with his last album, his relationship track was talking about his very complex relationship with a friend of his. This one talks about his very complex relationship with his father and how he's almost sort of scared to become like him, but at the same time, he really cares about him and wants him to know that before he passes. So it's a very interesting look into Sam's life, and I think he's brutally honest in this track. And there's plenty of other highlights throughout that I could talk about, but I think overall this is just a very strong album, and I think it proves that this guy is not a one-trick pony, and he's going to update his sound, because he's not just doing the typical classic rock sound, insert saxophone solo on every song. He does different stuff on every track, and I really appreciate that. So I think a great album overall. I think it really matches up well to his first, and yeah, I've listened to it a lot through this year. I think it has a lot of replay value. Okay, so moving on to my number 9 song. I'm almost 100% positive that Joseph has not listened to this band at all this year, and this band is actually not going to be making my top albums list, but they were very, very close. I did hear them late in the year, so that's probably why I didn't get as much time to listen to them as some of these other artists, but they are a synth pop duo known as Magdalena Bay. They became real critical darlings this year, and I follow a lot of music critics, so that's how I sort of came upon them. And of course, I checked them out, and I really liked what I heard. Synth pop has become one of my favorite genres. I just think there's a lot of innovation in it, and I think artists there are doing some interesting things. So the song by these artists is called Cherry, and it's like a very dark wave track. It reminds me of Nihilist Blues by Bring Me the Horizon and what it does. And I really love that song as well. So this one was an immediate shoe-in. It just has that sound that I really love. The way the synth beats are incorporated and the dark atmosphere, it creates almost a horror vibe that I really like. And the lead vocalist has this menacing voice that reminds me a lot of Grimes as a vocalist, except I might like her voice even better. And I just think the lyrics leave a lot to interpretation about what this song could be about, and that makes it a little more creepy to me as well. And I appreciate how the song sort of stays unpredictable throughout its runtime. It really sort of starts off very subtly, but then it builds up into this booming bass, and then there's just this sort of explosion that happens at the end that you don't see coming that I really love. So structurally, it's just an excellent pop song. Has excellent synth elements and something that I've just really dug, and it made its way up my list pretty quickly.
Alrighty, moving into the number 8. My number 8 album is a band you introduced me to, just like about 90% of the bands I listen to, but anyways, this is a band that I have come to love, and their new album is thematically something that I've been craving and loving a lot this year, and it's In the Court of the Dragon by Trivium. I mean, I don't know, I've just been loving fantasy stuff this year, so this was kind of more of a personal bend that I had this year toward fantasy themed stuff. But I mean, overall, it's just one of those albums that you just love to listen to. They're just Trivium is just musically so consistent and solid. The whole album is just it can get repetitive after a while, and that's why it didn't make it as far as their last album did. But I don't know, I think it just got up there just because of how thematically I loved it so much. And especially the title song. I just love the idea of they always make this stuff about Judgment Day and I don't know, stuff like that. It just gave me vibes of I don't know, Game of Thrones or something like that. I love the theme of the album overall. None of the songs made my top. It's just the whole package of the album was just a really satisfying album overall. So yeah, my number 8 song, this is where I'll start talking a little bit more. So let's get into it a little bit. This band, I know you know how much I adore this band. One of probably the most creative metal band that's out there right now. And they're a band that I will constantly sing the praises of. I found them in my sort of phase where I was listening to, all the little, I don't know, pop punk metal bands. But this band was the one that made it out of those for me consistently. And this song is The Shower Scene by Ice Nine Kills. I mean, I can't say enough about this band. They take from stuff that already exists, but the way they creatively spin it into music, I've just never seen anything like it. It's just incredible how they have done this twice in a row, and and the second album, which will be appearing very soon in like 10 minutes. But I just think the way they weave movies better than the books album, but you know, the way they weave all these horror movies, you can just tell their passion for like the horror movies, and like that passion seeps into like how creative the songs are. When I think to I guess 2019 was the last one when the It song made it into my top 10. That's just the type of creativity that's in this song. And obviously, you know, the shower scene, it's from Psycho, and this song, the part of the song that sticks out, and I think it sticks out to probably everyone who listens it, is just the really creative breakdown with the famous 3 notes.
Yeah.
I just absolutely, it's just like creativity like that, lyrical creativity that just really defines Ice Nine Kills, and it's just why like they are consistently always there, and I never miss a beat with all their stuff. They're just like, I can't stop singing their praises enough for what they do. So yeah.
Yeah, I'd actually, I'm going to comment on the past 2 things he talked about. The Trivium album, it barely missed my list, personally. I actually liked it better than what the Dead Men say, because of how heavy it was, and I think it was really creative. And also, I am a sucker for fantasy themes as well. And as far as Ice Nine Kills go, I enjoyed their album a lot this year. It wasn't really close to my list personally, but I really appreciated how on this album they embraced sort of a cheese factor in some of the songs, like the Child's Play one was so much fun, and
a lot of the songs were based on sort of cheesy to a certain
yeah.
extent. So.
The one that I liked the most, which surprised me, was a Rash Decision based on the Wrong Turn movies. I thought that one was a banger. I really enjoyed that one. But the shower scene was up there for me too, as well as Funeral Derangement.
Yeah,
that was a cool. But yeah, for my number 8 album and song, this is an artist that is very much so mainstream. They have gotten very popular in the Grammys. For their first album, they won all the 4 big awards, so they were under a lot of pressure for the second album, and I think they really delivered here. So at number 8, I have Billie Eilish's sophomore album, Happier Than Ever. I really loved her first album, When We All Fall Asleep, Where Do We Go? It just so happened that in the year it came out, there was so much strong music that year that it didn't quite make my list, even though I actually probably like that album a little better than this one. But this one, it just happened that it sort of made my list this year with the type of music that I was listening to. And I mean, it's really hard to say. They're in a neck and neck race for me. I think what really works for me about this one is that it is sort of a concept album, telling a story, and those are always the types of albums that I really love, where there's a very fleshed out story, and this one really fleshes out its story in about 16 tracks and almost an hour long. And that shows that I think Billie Eilish is pretty unique in the pop landscape, because she's taking some real risks that I feel like, whereas I feel like a lot of her contemporaries have played it pretty safe, and it's really cool to see a lot of the new pop artists being the ones that are changing up the landscape now, which I guess is what the mainstream really needs more than anything else. But I think Billie Eilish is one of the ones at the forefront of that. And this album really details a lot of different things about her as an artist, her relationship with the media, the pressure she's felt, which I imagine has been immense, being that she won 4 of the big Grammys, which she didn't want herself, and the fact that she's just absolutely blew up in her teenage years. She hasn't even really gotten the chance to grow up without public scrutiny. And I think there's just a lot of great highlights on this album. If you go to my channel, which you don't have to, and you look at my top 10 best hit songs list, you'll see that the title track from this album made my number 1 pick there, and it is also one of my favorite songs of the year. Not one of my top 10, but it is one of my favorites. I just really love what it does. And I think it's a really powerful song, because if you look at it in context of the album, she has described a relationship where she was sexually abused and treated horribly. And this song is sort of just a kiss off and a middle finger to this person, and saying how she's happier without him now. So it's a nice little redemption arc after some pretty bleak moments on this album. I also really like NDA. It's sort of a classic Billie song, has those horror aesthetics from her first album, which aren't in as much quantity on this album as I would hope. And I also really like Oxytocin, because it has sort of a industrial flair that reminds me of almost a Nine Inch Nails type thing, which I did not really expect from her. And I really enjoyed that cut, as well as the opener Getting Older and the acoustic cut Your Power, where she delivers a pretty important message about not abusing the power that you have and trying to use it for good. So I just think overall this album was really good, and it sort of proved Billie Eilish's critics wrong, I feel like, and that she's not just similar to Sam Fender, a one-trick pony who's just going to use her soft voice and horror vibes over and over again. She's going to do different things. So yeah, that's my number 8 pick. Then for my number 8 song, and this artist will be appearing again, but my number 8 song is Goliath by Architects. Yeah. Actually, another pick was very close to making my list here from Architects, and Ordinary Extinction. That one was also really good, but I think Goliath was really the one that triumphed for me, because it sort of as much as I really liked what Architects did with this album, this one sort of had their classic sound from their past 2 albums, I feel like. Well, not classic, but the sound they've been boasting on their past couple of albums that I've really loved. And it does some new things with it in context of this album, incorporating the electronics and synths that they have, and of course Sam Carter using his clean vocals a lot more. And I personally really love his clean vocals, especially on this song. I think he really goes to some new heights in the chorus. I think his voice sounds beautiful in the chorus, honestly. And of course this song goes with the themes of the album of like trying to appreciate the world while we're here and not taking it for granted, and accepting that we need to do some things or this world is going to end prematurely, things like that. And I really just enjoy the lyrics here, with the sort of visual imagery that they give. It creates a really foreboding feel that I really like. And then Simon Neil of the band Biffy Clyro comes in, a band who I've never really listened to, but I definitely want to listen to, because his feature is really impressive here. He lets off some monstrous screams that I really liked. And the song also has a really killer breakdown that I enjoyed. So pretty much everything that I love about Architects, I think their talent shines through loud and clear on this song, and it was just a very fun listen that I kept coming back to over the year.
All right. I mentioned that this album would be coming up within the next 10 minutes, and it is. For my number 7 album, it is The Silver Scream 2 by Ice Nine Kills. I was going to bring up the track listing because, James mentioned a couple of the extra songs from that album. Funeral Derangements based on Pet Sematary, one of my personal favorite Stephen King works. I know a lot of people don't like it, so it's one of the weird ones, but that's why I like it, of course. So here we are. Let me bring it up real quick because I am a prepared and professional streamer. The opening album, it's one of their classic, like, sort of arena style songs. There's a few others that are just sort of there. Assault and Batteries was one of my favorite singles. I don't think it didn't make it onto the final album, I don't think. Oh wait, no, it did. It's number 4. I like that song a lot. It's overall, I think it's overall weaker than the first one, but I still enjoyed it overall. James mentioned both of them basically, that were the best ones. Funeral Derangements and A Rash Decision. There's just some really solid stuff on the album overall, and I think I said it more with the song than the album, which makes no sense, but just gotta harp on the creativity of the album as a whole again, just to emphasize why it's my number 7. But yeah, my number 7 song comes from a band that I have had a complicated and mostly why did they fall off so bad direction. This was probably one of my favorite, it would have been my top 10 favorite bands at some point, probably. But this year they made a big comeback. This full album will be coming back again. But my number 7 song is Devastation by Beartooth. I'll talk about their album more, but this is just the song individually. This song is just like, it's pure Beartooth bliss, to put it frankly. I personally, I think Beartooth's first album is probably in my top 10 favorite albums of all time. It had a really emotional impact on me for the time it was released. It was a brutally honest, savage, and exceptionally depressing but eye-opening album. Beartooth's new album is just sort of, it's what they do. It's like an ode to rock, and how and Caleb Shomo doesn't think rock will die. It's clearly not going to at this point. So yeah, but this song in particular, it's just one of those songs that you can listen to and just put yourself in like a mosh pit to just dance in. It's an awesome song, and it's just like, yeah, it's got a great classic Beartooth breakdown and stuff like that. But I'll talk about the album as a whole more later on. But yeah, that's my number 7 song.
Okay. Okay, so for my number 7 album, this is an artist that appeared on my list back in, I think it was it 2018? It could have been 2019 now that I'm thinking about it. But the band Tremonti and their album Marching in Time. When their last album came out, A Dying Machine from that album was one of my favorite songs. Oh my God, yeah. Yes. And I was so happy to see them back. I think they took like a 3-year break or something. So it was really cool to see them back this year. Mark Tremonti is just an incredibly talented guitarist. I think one of the best guitarists we have out there right now. Of course, he also works with the band Alter Bridge, who is very heavily lauded in their own right now. I love Alter Bridge, and I might like Tremonti better, even though Alter Bridge is a more critically loved band. Just Tremonti goes for a much more intense sound that I absolutely love. And while I don't like this album as much as A Dying Machine, once again, A Dying Machine wins out because it has such a cool conceptual story about sort of a robot and it becoming more human over the course of the album. This one is more just like a straightforward rock album, but also talking about the idea of time and how our time is limited and we should appreciate things. And I think it's a simplistic arc to talk about, but I think the band does a really good job in discussing it. And there's so many great songs on here. The title track is almost 8 minutes long, and it really never loses steam over its runtime. I think it stays consistently interesting and has a lot of cool progressive metal elements in it that I really like. The Last One of Us is just a gorgeous ballad. I love when this band does ballads because it always seems like they really nail the emotion in them, and I really appreciated what this one went for. And there's just a whole bunch of bangers on here from beginning to end. I feel like it's just a very fun metal album through and through, and I think it just shows every member of the band firing on all cylinders and making just a really great album that will sort of, I feel like, stand the test of time over the years as a really just great metal album overall, with a lot of fun rock elements incorporated in it as well. I always really appreciate what this band does, and I am just sort of glad I discovered them randomly a couple years ago, because I've really gotten hooked on them. And this album is proof that they are just incredibly talented. So yeah, that's my number 7 album. Now for my number 7 song, and this is an artist that is going to be appearing pretty soon as well for me, but it is Secret Garden by Spiritbox. They're similarly to Architects. I feel like there was a lot of songs from Spiritbox's album that I could have picked, but yeah, there was a lot of good ones. But Secret Garden was the one that really stood out to me as an indication of, I think, why this band blew up so much this year, because they sort of came out of nowhere, I feel like, with Holy Roller, which was just such a huge song. I'll talk about that one later, but I think this song shows that they are bringing some revitalization to the metalcore scene that I think it is in desperate need of. Yeah, specifically the mainstream metalcore scene, because it's really been not as great as in past years, I feel like. It's mainly the fringe bands who are reviving it, I feel like. Well, but calling Spiritbox a fringe band now would not be accurate. It's just that they were sort of on that end with their previous EP, but now they're huge. And this song has some really interesting just huge atmosphere to it that it builds up through its instrumentation. The band said they were going for a sort of Deftones vibe with the song, which I can really sort of see when you think about it, specifically in how thick the production is throughout the song. And the chorus specifically is just really something that hooked me right away, and I really like the mysterious feeling it gave, like using this secret garden as an interesting, I feel like, symbol for the things that the lead singer sort of hides away, or the parts of herself that she doesn't want to lose as an artist. I think it's sort of an interesting commentary on the artistic process and how the risk of losing yourself as an artist when you become sort of a bigger group. And I really hope that the song doesn't become a self-fulfilling prophecy in that regard, and that Spirit Box stays innovative, because I think this song does a good job at tapping into those insecurities and speaks a lot of truth, because a lot of innovative artists do lose who they are when they become bigger and sort of give in to a lot of the pressures of the mainstream. But this song gives me a lot of hope for this band. I think it's just a really excellent track and has a lot of interesting stuff going on in it.
All right. Number 6 album for me. This is a band that I'm sure you've heard of. They're pretty popular in the metal scene. Unfortunately, in recent years, they have been memed into existence for how bad their stuff has been, and I'll give it to people. Their stuff since, you know, for a long time has been really terrible. But this band had a revitalization album that I'd sort of equate to Palisades' self-titled album. And this band is Volumes, and this album is called Happier, with a question mark. So Happier. But none of the songs from this album made it into my top 10. But the album overall is sort of it's conceptually it's one of those albums that has that emotional kick in the last song that's like, are you the question of the album, I mean, obviously the title should tell you everything. It's like, are you happy or not? Are you really happy? Like, you know, it goes through all the waves of like talking about losing relationships, losing people dying. I think someone in the band's life close to them died. It was one of the roughest songs to listen to was about that. And then the last song is a gut punch that's like, are you really happy or not? And it just ends on that like, whoa, emotional hit. And that's why it's just my number 6. It's like, I was really happy because I knew the band had some like real talent. They have this the lead singer, Queen vocalist, I forget his name, but he has one of the smoothest Queen voices. And the other lead singer who does the Unqueens, he was doing hip hop for a while, and his Queen voice just went. There's this song, it's called oh shoot, what's it called? I forget what it's called, but there's just a lot of songs where he shows off his new Queen vocals, and it's like I knew they had talent, and they hit it out of the park with this album, with their best album in a very long time, and I really loved it overall. My number 6 song is from a band that again seems to appear in my top 10s very frequently, and it's Dark Bloom by We Came as Romans. We Came as Romans is, you know, they've been consistently one of my bands. Cold Like War is an incredible album in its own right, and I look forward to when they release their new album. Losing Kyle, obviously, probably one of the biggest hits to the metal genre ever. Probably one of my personal favorite Queen vocalists ever. Especially listening back to Cold Like War, it's like, man, it just hurts a lot. Yeah. Dark Bloom is a very, it's a heavy hitting song. Their next album is gonna be gut wrenching when they make their next album. But this song, Dark Bloom, it's about moving on. It's the whole song. It's about moving on. You know, there's something about We Came as Romans. I didn't know if they would make another album, or make another song, but seeing them thrive and continue to have that classic We Came as Romans vibe, even better since they've signed away from whoever they were with before. But just seeing them come back and just continue to be amazing, a top voice in the metal genre is just incredible. So yeah.
Okay, so for my number 6 album, once again, I foreshadowed that I would be talking about this band eventually, pretty soon, and here they are. It is Spirit Box's album, Eternal Blue. I just think this is a excellent debut album. If you haven't heard it, you need to listen to their previous EP as well. I think it has a lot of cool stuff, and I think it's more like Periphery-esque than this new album was, which it's surprising to me because I usually prefer a Periphery sound, but I like what they do on this new album a little better than the EP, even though the EP had a lot of cool stuff in it as well. But I really think they really showed the full extent of what they're capable of on this new album, and I think they are totally deserving of the hype. There's some bands, but I don't think Spirit Box fits that. I think they deserve all the acclaim they've gotten this year. This album just through and through is superb and has a lot of great stuff in it. Courtney LaPlante is an incredible vocalist, perhaps one of the best vocalists working right now in the metalcore genre, I think I can say. She just has some brutal screams that just blow you away. You're like, this is the person this is coming from.
I thought it was a guy screaming. I'm gonna be real. When I heard she was, I was like, excuse. I listened to all the songs with like completely different.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And
anyone can do it.
The metalcore genre, women aren't in the metalcore genre represented enough, I feel like. So it's always refreshing when you see one coming to the forefront, because there are a lot of talented women who scream in the genre, just aren't recognized enough, and probably some that I've never even discovered for that reason. But Courtney LaPlante is just an impressive vocalist. Just watch some of her YouTube videos where she does songs in one take, and you'll... Yeah. And speaking of Holy Roller, when I first heard that song, it just absolutely blew my mind.
Did you hear the one?
With who?
Rio Kineshoda from how did I forget?
Crystal Lake?
Crystal Lake, yeah.
No, I didn't hear that.
They've got a version of that with him.
Oh, I'm going to have to hear that one. Yeah. But the song is just... It's sort of terrifying, honestly. The screams she lets out and the breakdowns are awesome. I mean, it's just a song with breakdown after breakdown, which are songs that I always enjoy as long as they don't become cartoonishly over the top, and I don't think that song does that. Yellow Jacket is an absolute banger, features Sam Carter of Architects, and I feel like it's probably his best, even though I like Goliath as a song, I think Yellow Jacket is one of his best vocal performances he's done in recent memory. I really liked it. Yeah. Constance is just a haunting closer about losing a loved one to Alzheimer's, and it's very haunting. Reminds me of a Silent Planet song in a way. The Silent Planet song about Alzheimer's, I can't remember what it's called now, but it was from their album a couple years back when the end began. It really reminded me of that. And the title track is really interesting here too, having a lot of interesting stuff going on in it. And I really like the opener, Sunkiller. Reminded me a lot of what Thornhill was doing with their opening song, honestly, from their previous album. And yeah, there's just a lot of great songs on here that I could talk about more. Circle With Me is just a classic metalcore song. I mean, it's not doing anything super new, but I think it's very solid for what it does. And Halcyon is a really cool song as well. I mean, most of the tracks here I really enjoy, and I think this band shows that they can do metalcore well, and they can do other styles well too, because they don't just stay in one box. So yeah, great album overall, just excellent. Now for my number 6 song, it is by a band called Normandy. This is their 3rd album, actually. I sort of discovered them this year, and man, I wish I'd discovered them earlier, because they sort of have the type of sound that I really love. They remind me a lot of Too Close to Touch, and I feel like they sort of picked off where that band disappointingly left off and fell off, if I'm being honest. This song really brought those like deep emotions back in a rock hardcore sound that I've really been missing. And I think out of all the songs on here, vocally this one might be the most talented, in my opinion. If I'm looking at it from an objective perspective, I think this vocalist might be the most talented of anyone on this list, because he just has an excellent voice here. He takes his voice to some incredible heights, especially in the chorus, that just absolutely blows my mind every time I hear it. And I mean, it talks about a brokenness and feeling like a hostage to your own emotions. And I think the way they talk about that topic is really well done and very powerful. And of course, I'm always a sucker for when guitars are incorporated well with electronics. And I think this song does that really well. Similarly to other bands on this list, there are other songs I could have chosen from this band, but I think Hostage really stood out to me with its powerful emotions and just the excellent musicality throughout.
All right, moving into the top fives. My top five, my number five album, and number five song, I didn't even notice that. They both come from the same artist. This is an artist, probably one of maybe in single digits of bands that I introduced you to. And that is Iridescent by Silent Planet. I mean, their last album, I don't even think made it into my top 15 albums of last time. I mean, I know you loved it. I compare. It's hard to compare when you're a band like Silent Planet and you make 3 back-to-back albums that are all incredible. And then Iridescent just comes out and might be my favorite album by them, but that's going to take a lot more listens because I listened to Everything Is Sound about 5,000 times. But I digress. Iridescent is might be their hardest album, you know, from a metal standpoint, of all of them. Each song just has this gut punching emotional impact that you expect from Silent Planet. I love Silent Planet. Everything that the way that Garrett does his lyrics and everything, he's one of the most talented, if not the most talented metal lyricist in the genre. I will say he's probably up there with, like, you know, Jesse Cash from Era and stuff like that. You know, he just does some great stuff, and you know, he deepens his songs by providing, you know, the little numbers above with like the explanations where they come from, whether it's a biblical verse or a book or whatever. I just love the way Silent Planet does their stuff, and this album just has this arc of, like, you know, it's a very typical Silent Planet arc of, like, you know, Garrett sort of inhabits almost sort of a biblical standpoint of some characters, but you know, the album overall has this just like it sort of wavers through a lot of themes of, like, you know, terminal liminals like cancer and stuff like that. There's a lot of, you know, sort of songs about medical conditions and sort of, and then there's like the typical you know, Christian themed songs where it's just talking about all that type of stuff. But a lot of, you know, Silent Planet, a lot of their songs are just shrouded in this mystery because their lyrics are so deep and complex. It's like their albums require a lot of listening and, frankly, a lot of research for an album. So it's very interesting. And my number 5 song comes from the album, and I think this is the first time in a very long time that the opening song of an album has been my favorite. But Translate the Night is my number 5 song from that album. It's just it starts out like immediately, just like no rest, no nothing. It's one of the better Silent Planet songs overall, I think, of their catalog of songs. It's just it's one of those opening songs where it's like it's sort of laying out the framework of, like, one of my favorite opening lyrics to a song. It's like it's the opening lyrics to this album. I try to speak, but some thoughts are too loud for words. It's like that's the perfect opening to, like, introducing the concept of an album. Essentially, it's like, what do I put into words? What's sort of, I guess, happened over the last few years to a certain extent. What do I put into words? How do I put into words where it's like where we're gonna go from here? It's like it's crazy. The whole song is basically just about, like, trying to figure out what the heck's going on right now. And but you know, the band does it in a way that's, like, interesting and makes you think a little bit more, and that's why I love it so much. But yeah.
All right. So for my number 5 album, this is a band that I got into this year as well. I've always heard of this band, and I think I've probably heard some songs of them in passing because they're a pretty well liked band, and I think they're pretty popular within the symphonic metal sphere specifically. But it is Epica with their album Omega. This is a gigantic album. It's almost an hour and a half long, and I don't think it ever really lost me very often. I really liked what it was doing, and symphonic metal, when done right, can be among my favorite genres. It's just that it needs to be careful about not being repetitive in what it's doing, and I think this album does a really good job of that, and boasting a lot of different types of sounds. There are just so many good moments on this album that I really enjoyed, and as a band's name would imply, it's a pretty epic sounding album too. I just feel like it's huge in its soundscape, and really goes there in terms of its sound without sounding absolutely ridiculous. I think it just has a lot of fun with its sound, and there's so many fun tracks on here. The opener, Abyss of Time, is great and really sets the tone for this album throughout, I feel like. The way this band combines the lead singer's gorgeously sung vocals along with like some really pretty intense screams is pretty interesting. It's not something I've really heard before in this way, and it's pretty unique, I feel like, for this band. When you hear these very intense screams paired up against these beautiful sounding strings, it's something that's a little bit unconventional, but something that I really appreciate. And then there's, of course, some more slightly conventional tracks like Freedom, which just has everything you could possibly want out of a symphonic metal song, I feel like. And there's even some songs here that I feel like are leaning into some more foreign territory. Like there's almost a song that has like some Egyptian sounding flares to it that I think is really interesting. And I think that's sort of leaning into how the band also sort of addresses a lot of different types of spirituality on this album, like Buddhism and Hinduism and things like that. And it doesn't ever really say where it leans, it just sort of explores them, which I think is pretty interesting for an album like this. And I think exploring the spirituality is very fitting for an album with this epic of a sound, because I feel like spirituality naturally lends to creating big sounds and big atmospheres. So I really appreciated that about this album. I mean, overall, even though the album was pretty complex, my reasons for liking it are pretty simple. It's just a really epic album, and I really loved what it did with its sound. And then for my number 5 song, this comes from Tremonti, and the song is called Let That Be Us. While I don't think any song by Tremonti is going to beat out A Dying Machine for me, I really enjoyed what this song did. It is an absolute banger with some of the nastiest guitar riffs I've heard all year. I mean, the way the song starts, it just comes in rolling with these huge guitar riffs that are incredible, and then the song sort of unexpectedly shifts to these sort of lighter guitar riffs and a more upbeat vibe. Whereas you think this song is going to be like a pretty intense thematically, it actually is a pretty solid, positive song. Talking about leaving behind negative emotions and leaving behind the harder parts of your life, and just sort of living in a more positive mindset for the future. And it's almost sort of like something where this artist is where Mark Tremonti is very hopeful for this happening in the future, and that all of us can live like that. And I really like that he sort of gives that positive message in a year where I think that type of message was really needed, because 2021 in some ways felt almost as dismal as 2020. So I think a message like this song was very relevant for this year. And yeah, overall, it's just a really fun song, and I think it's the biggest showing of Mark Tremonti's guitar talent, because there's a great guitar solo in here as well, and I think the rest of the band is firing off here as well. I really love the drum work here, and lyrically, I think it's just really well written, and just an overall great metal song.
All right, going into number 4s. I think even for me, especially it'll be for you, how high up this album appeared on my list. I feel like this year was a lot of years of like comebacks for some of my favorite metal bands. This band was no exception. In normal life, there would never be a world where this band is above Silent Planet, but it's 2021. Who cares? Everything's weird. But my number 4 album is Below by Beartooth. And there's a lot of reasons for that. I mean, let me just start off by saying this band, their last two albums just like made me so sad, because I love Beartooth, but their last two albums were so cliche, to the point rock. It's like, I thought they were going into that. They definitely went to that radio style with Aggressive, which might be one of my least favorite like rock albums of all time. And then the album after that was just like, they tried to go back to their sound, but like none of it really worked. I don't even remember the name of their last album. That's how bad it was. But this album brought back the energy, the excitement that I know Beartooth for. Beartooth doesn't do anything crazy with their lyrics. They're not going to be a band that you research for 5 hours about where they got their lyrics from. But they do what, like, you know, the old classic rock bands, metal bands would do, and they just fire you up with their songs. And this album successfully did such a thing. The opening song is just like, it just immediately gets in your face with, you know, Caleb Shomo's screams. I still think he's one of, like, his screaming style, his voice, it's got to be one of the most recognizable and one of my favorite metal unclean vocalists, probably. Devastation, I already mentioned, is my favorite song from the album. But even from this album, some of their more poppy sort of regular rock ventures were way more successful this time around. Like The Past Is Dead, I thought was a really catchy and well-written song. And you know, stuff like, and The Answer was like really cool. One of the songs that sort of surprised me, I'm a huge fan of instrumentals. Last year, I forgot, the Doom Eternal soundtrack was my number 10 album. So I'm like, I'm a huge sucker for instrumentals. And the closing song, The Last Riff, was really interesting for like closing the album with a pure instrumental, like just a lot of, you know, it sort of reminded me of a progressive song, just like over and over the same riffs to like sort of hammer in the meaning, which I think like you can interpret however you want. Like, rock isn't dead, like that riff, the rock riffs are going to be played forever essentially. But yeah, I overall adored the album. It's not like I said, you're not going to be doing research on it for 5 hours, but it's a fun listen that gets you like hyped up and stuff like that. My number 4 song is this is the first appearance of this band on this list, and they got really high up from the moment I started listening to them. But it's Eternal Blue by Spirit Box. This is the title track, not the album. The album will be appearing soon. But
that wouldn't have been the pick I was.
it wouldn't have been the title track. It's gotta. I never talk about the bridge in a song, but this song's got to have one of the most addicting bridges of all time. And I love the sort of theme. It almost, I don't know, like it's like. You like imagine yourself in space almost. It's like the eternal blue sun. It's like super cool imagery that's all in there.
Reconnect.
Okay, are we back? Oh dear. Are we back? Hello? There we go. Okay. We have got some stormy storms going on over here, so lol. But anyways, as I was saying, Eternal Blue, great song. My entire train of thought just got disconnected, so that's awesome. But anyways, yeah, I just love that song. Got a great chorus, great.
Okay. So my number 4 through 1, up until this point, my 10 through 5 have been albums I would consider 4s out of 5s. My 4 through 1 are all either 9s out of 10s or 10s out of 10s for me. Whereas last year, I think most of my albums were 4 out of 5s, except for like my top 2. So that's just sort of a testament to how strong this year was. And my 4, 3, and 2 are all pretty neck and neck with each other. Like, it is incredible how close they are, because I really loved all these pretty equally. Goes to Normandy. The album is called Enjoyed This Band when I talked about their song Hostage, but I mean, that sort of goes for the whole album. I think it just has the type of music that I am a huge sucker for, with just a combination of electronics and pretty hard-hitting guitar riffs, and a vocalist who is just incredibly talented and doesn't get enough recognition. There's so many bands that fit that label for me that I really love, and this is another one that I can add to that list. There's just so many wonderful songs on here. Mission Control was one that I almost considered putting for my favorite song by this band, because this one is just so unique. I really like what it does, and as a sound would imply, as a title would imply, rather, it has almost a space vibe to it that I really liked. And the way the synths create almost a breakdown is really intriguing in this track. Holy Water uses a lot of religious metaphors in a way I think is creative. Usually I get very tired of the trope of using like religious metaphors for a toxic relationship, but I think it really works in this one, and I think it's really interesting what the band does. And also, this song is probably the most varied stylistically, going from some more poppy tendencies to having some of the most metalcore tendencies on the album as well. And at only 10 tracks, it's actually pretty impressive that this album got up this high, because the album is also pretty short, and I usually prefer longer albums that explore their concepts more, but I think this one stayed for the amount of time it needed, and almost every song here is just something that sticks out to me. Atmosphere is a gorgeous cut, just a beautiful ballad. Thrown in the Gutter is an absolute banger, and I think the closer, Chemicals, is really interesting and almost reminds me of something that Thousand, their last album, which I think it's done a little better, honestly, in some ways. But yeah, I really just front to back enjoyed this album. Only one cut that I didn't love, and even then that one wasn't that bad, but the cuts that stand out here are just absolutely incredible, and this is a band I'm obviously going to be keeping my eye on for the near future. Now for my number 4 song, that's pretty short on this one because this song sort of embodies
Okay, we're back again. Wow, I can't believe it. Incredible. Okay. We're at 500 kilobytes per second, and now we're at zero again. Okay, now it's been at red for like an hour, so yeah, it's bad. We will get through it though, even if we reconnect 100 times. Anyways, the album just has a lot of great cuts. The opening song, I actually tend to agree with you that it's a very Thornhill-esque opening style with Sunkiller. It's even, but we are disconnecting a lot, so yeah. We're trying to get through this as best as we can, but we will. Let me see. So yes, the album, I mean, once again, James said most of the stuff that I agree with. In terms of the songs, I just got to give a special shout out to Holy Roller, like Silk in the Streams into Holy Roller, two of the most brutal metal songs right back to back. I just love those two songs right next to each other, and then it just goes right into Eternal Blue, and it's just this awesome dichotomy. The whole album is just this awesome dichotomy of everything I love about metal, like from the softness to the full throttle hardcore metal. It's just like the whole album is almost like, for me, like a love letter to everything that's great about metal. Unless it says disconnecting. I love this band has, I listened to this band a lot more when their 2014 album came out, but this song just sort of came out. It was a single this year, but this is the Chapel Town Rag by Slipknot. I love Slipknot. They're just, Corey is one of the most talented metal vocalists out there, and this song brings a lot of vibes from the Gray Chapter, which is probably one of my favorite albums of all time, in terms of like the concept, the execution. This song brings a lot more of their, almost horror vibes from their first two albums, their self-titled Into Iowa. Some of the craziest stuff from those albums in terms of horror metal. But it's, when you listen to the song, it gets even more interesting when you do research on the song. It's like classic Slipknot when you listen to it. If their next album is anything like this, it might even be crazier than We Are Not Your Kind, in terms of like this is probably going to be their comeback to like their completely original sound and stuff. But like Corey's Unqueens and Queens together just work like so perfectly. Gives me more of those like horror metal vibes, which I think is something that really Slipknot has a unique talent of executing successfully. So yeah, I just love the song, and It just has some really great guitar riffs. Some of his, almost like, I guess it's rapping. You can't really say it any other way. It's just like, I love when he does that stuff, and it's just like the talent of the band on display. Jay, the drummer, having to take over for their last drummer, who the Gray Chapter was made for after he passed, has taken up an incredibly difficult mantle and debatably done better. I love the drumming in it. All the instrumentals. They're like a super band, so their sound is just insanely huge, and they delivered on it in this song as well. So yeah.
Okay, so my number 3 album and number 3 song both come from the same artist. And this is an artist that I have been into for about, I would say, 5 years now, maybe. They were an artist that I discovered from a YouTuber that I follow, a music reviewer, and I am very thankful that I discovered them because I really love their sound. But this third album is called Screen Violence, and it is by a band called Churches. They are a synth pop band once again. Like I said, that has become one of my favorite genres as of late. And I think it's hard to say whether this is their best album because they have 3 really good albums and then one that's really disappointing. But 3 of their albums are top tier, I feel like. And this one is really close to their first 2 albums, I think, in terms of quality. I might even like it better than their first album. I'm not sure about second, because second album is really holds a special place for me. But this album just did a lot of really cool stuff with their sound, and I think expanded it in interesting ways. It added in some pretty intriguing rock elements, which I was not expecting from this band. And I think it also did a really good job of incorporating some horror elements as well. There's a song called Final Girl, which of course is a reference to the idea of being the final girl in a horror movie, and the way that Churches talks about that and does some commentary on it is really interesting. Violent Delights was a song I was a sucker for because the title itself is a Shakespeare reference. These violent delights will have violent ends. And the song itself is just an absolute banger as well, with some of the heaviest sounding synths I've heard in any song. And yeah, there's other great tracks on here as well. Nightmare is probably the most intense that Churches has ever sounded, with some very intense guitar work that really surprised me. The opener, which is called Asking for a Friend, is classic Churches. If you want to get into Churches or you're curious about them, this is a song you should start with because it is basically their sound to a T. It made me smile because it's sort of the sound that was lacking on their last album, where they tried to go this more accessible route. And it just didn't work for them. It wasn't nearly as interesting. And Good Girls is really cool as well. Once again, having a classic Churches vibe. I actually like the remakes they did with John Carpenter, out of all people. John Carpenter of Halloween fame. And it's really cool as well. I mean, it obviously shows how much they were inspired by horror for this album, which was something I was a huge sucker for. But my favorite song on the album, which also happens to be my 3rd favorite song of the year, is How Not to Drown. This song is just incredible. From the first time I heard it, I was almost convinced that it was going to be my favorite song of the year with how much I loved it, but other songs did end up beating it out. But it is still high up there, and it is just a superb song. First of all, it features Robert Smith of the classic rock band The Cure, and he is just incredible here. His voice is awesome in this song, and it's just sort of a legendary collaboration that a lot of people were not expecting, because synth pop and classic rock don't cross over that often, obviously, but it was just showing how willing this band was to embrace this rock synth pop sound that they were doing on this album. And of course, as the title would imply, this song includes a lot of water metaphors, so there's a lot of ways you could interpret this. And I actually think this song is once again sort of about drowning in like the industry and in the mainstream and sort of losing yourself as an artist. And I think it's actually done in an even better way than the song I was talking about earlier in my top 10. And I think it's just because of the well-written lyrics. This has got to be one of Church's best written songs. and the chorus is just, it hooks its claws in you from the first time you hear it, I feel like. But where this song really sold me was in its instrumental outro, where it really just, I don't even know how to describe what it does, but it is something that just blew my mind when I first heard it, and I still really love hearing it every time. So yeah, this was a really awesome song with a pretty cool collaboration, and I just think it is probably going to end up being one of my favorite songs of all time down the road. I just absolutely loved it.
All right, getting into the number twos. We're at 22,000 dropped frames, so there you go. Another huge congratulations for the end of 2022 as Spectrum continues to prove how dog water they are. But we will get through it. So my number two, this is my number two album. This is the only album that even came close to competition to beating my number one. This is a band that I've listened to fairly frequently, but their last album was back in 2018 and it was really good. But this album was even better. This band is they're called Between the Buried and Me, and they're famed for this album way back in 2007 called Colors. And this album is Colors 2. It's a spiritual sequel to the first one, 14 years later. So yeah, this album is, it's progressive metal. So obviously I'm going to gravitate towards it immediately. The album is, it has just this consistent sound, this soundscape that's just like incredible. You know, the name of the album is Colors. It's like, I don't know, there's sometimes when you're listening to it and you just feel like you're just being surrounded by, you know, different colors. But yeah, it's really sick. It's a really sick album overall. I think my second favorite song is also from this album, but a few other songs that I'll talk about. The opening song, Monochrome, is really awesome. It's the first song of an album is always meant to sort of bring you in. Monochrome, sort of the intention is actually sort of the opposite. Monochrome is like this very dull song that's like, you know, monochrome is obviously means one color. It's like the opening song is very like, this is the concept and it's like, this is just one thing, but like the album just opens up and goes into these progressive songs that, you know, are 9 minutes, 10 minutes long. It's awesome. Stuff like Turbulent, one of the better songs. The Future is Behind Us, one of the lead singles of the album, one of the best songs on the album, frankly. But my favorite song from the album is called Never, and this is my second favorite song as well, is Never Seen / Future Shock. This song, I was meaning to bring up the lyrics because it has one lyric that I really like, and I am talking to stall a little bit while I bring it up. And it is almost, yep, there it is. There was one, the album conceptually is about, like, you know, humanity. It's a very simple concept. It's not crazy. One of my favorite it's 5 lines. Clean it all away, plotting and spinning, clash with one another. Ravens used to speak like us, peering in on the souls of Limbo City. It's just this super cool concept of, like, the whole song just feels like you're sort of floating through like an ethereal plane, essentially, if I can wax theoretical for a second. It's about 12 minutes long, and it's got incredible guitar riffs, this incredible atmosphere that almost reminds me of Tool meets Periphery, which is like, if you have that pitch, you've got a banger. So yeah, it's hard not to say that it's you just got to listen to it to sort of understand. It's just one of those songs that you have to listen to really understand the impact that it had.
Okay, so for my number 2 album, I feel like I'm probably going to be literally one of the only people that has this album this high on my list, as it seemed like most people did not like this album. But for me, it connected with me pretty much right away, and that is For Those That Wish to Exist by Architects. I really love this album, and I get the criticisms. I get the idea that the band really sort of drastically changed their sound here in almost a Bring Me the Horizon-esque way, but I don't know. I really liked this album, and once again, it does have a sound that I'm sort of a sucker for. That's something that I just can't help but love. It's got the electronics in it, it's got the synth work, and it's got the type of guitar work that I really enjoy, and I just really liked Sam Carter as a vocalist throughout this whole album, I think. Even though I did say that I think Yellow Jacket was his best vocal performance this year, probably, I think he was great throughout this album. I think he put on a solid performance, and even though he didn't use his screams as some would have probably hoped, myself included, I really liked his clean voice, and I think he really showed his talent through on this album. I think he's only improved in his cleans over time. And conceptually, I think this album does a really good job at delivering its arc. While it's not as personal and deep as Holy Hell was, I do sort of like the sort of larger scope as they're focusing on the world as a whole and climate change and things like that, and how we need to start appreciating the world around us and the people around us, essentially, if we're going to be on this world for any longer. We're giving the world a sort of premature end. And I think musically, the band does a good job at communicating those stakes, as there's a lot of big sounding songs on this album. And I think this album has a lot of fun. Black Lungs was a single that I immediately enjoyed. And I think it does a good job at establishing the theme of the album pretty quickly. Little Wonder goes for an almost like a dark synth dance vibe that I really enjoyed, and the guest vocalist from Royal Blood was a really good fit on this song. As well as, I also need to load up the songs on here to remember what I was going to say. Libertine was a really interesting track. I think it used the central thesis of using rain as an interesting sort of symbol for other things. Discourse is Dead was a pretty definitive statement on the album as well. Probably one of the angriest for Sam Carter vocally. I really liked his screams on this track, and I sort of agreed with the central sentiment of it. Dead Butterflies, I just loved the orchestration on this song, and I really loved the chorus of this track. Animals was a really fun lead single as well. Even though this one ended up not being one of my favorites, I still think it is a solid lead single, and I think it did a good job at establishing what this album was going to be about before it came out. Meteor was an interesting cut that I feel like got hated on way too much by people. Even though it was probably one of the most accessible songs, I really liked what it did with its radio rock flair. An Ordinary Extinction is an absolute banger, an addicting song. And yeah, there just wasn't really that much that I disliked on this album, to be honest. I really loved it, and I think it gets hated on too much personally. Like I said, I can understand the critiques, but I don't think it deserves to be as hated as much as it was. So yeah, that's my number 2 album. Now for my number 2 song. My number 2 and number 1 were very hard to rank for songs specifically, because I loved both of these songs for different reasons, but I loved them almost equally. But my number 2 ended up being Vanish Canvas by Era.
Not pointed to that one.
Yeah. Honestly, I feel like without this song, as well as Lunar Halo that came before it, the album would not have worked as well as it did, because I feel like the album hinges on those 2 tracks in order for its concept to be fleshed out in the way it actually does get fleshed out. Vanish Canvas is just a gorgeous track. I love Jesse Cash's vocals on this song. He is just so good here. I mean, he's always good. He's always been a good vocalist, but I really love his singing on this one. And I just think the way the guitars and the drums progress throughout this song is really interesting, and they're constantly shifting what they're doing in almost a sort of periphery fashion. I feel like it's really cool. And of course, I think this is a really good combination of JTKV and Jesse Cash's vocals. I think they do a really good trade-off here and what they do, and it creates a really interesting sound for them. And I think it's just the most perfect their sound has sounded since probably Alpha Seed, if I'm being honest. Alpha Seed is probably going to always be my favorite era song, but this track comes awfully close for me. And lyrically, I think it's just one of the most emotionally reassuring songs the band has made, and I really love what it's saying. Like, let this moment break your heart, something greater to impart. Anxieties that you try to pacify will keep you going under. And they also say, follow me to the sound, conscious soul to be found. So it's almost like they're leaning this person out of a very dark place in their life, and they're trying to be reassuring for this person in a broken state, and maybe even sort of reassuring to themselves that they can get out of these dark places and sort of find happiness again. And yeah, I think that's the reason why this song is so essential for the album, because the album starts off in a very dark place with this person being beaten down on with like technology and the world itself oppressively beating them down, and then this song is sort of like the transition into this new state for them that I really like. I mean, it ends off with saying we are waking out of this coma, like a symbolic reawakening of this person as a happier, spiritually and mentally, physically happier person than they were before. I think it's just a really powerful song that deserves a lot of accolades.
All right, into the number ones as we stabilize at a solid 6181 kilobytes per second, and we are green. All right, my number one album of 2021. It is hard when you're a band that has 5 almost quite literally perfect albums and has my favorite Queen vocalist in anything ever. But my number one album is Era's self-titled album. It was a hard competition between Colors 2 and this one, but this album was beaten out by, or that album was beaten out by Era's album just by the slimmest of margins, and the slimmest of margins will be my number one song, which I will talk about in a second. Just talking about the album overall, I mean, James said it for the most part, but you know, Era just has these, you know, when you look at the progression from Drift to Neon to this, it's like a full circle. Drift was a completely new sound. I love Drift to death, still do. Neon was sort of Drift part 2, wasn't anything crazy, but I enjoyed it. And this album, it sort of circles back to square one of like Era's more sort of insane loose style mixed with like you sort of called it hinging, and I'll say Era hinges on Jesse Cash controlling everything. His unqueen vocals, his ability with the guitar to bridge everything together, and just like their structurally sound songs turned into these sort of wild, like, especially when you look at Snowblood, that song is just all over the place, but it's controlled at the same time. It's controlled chaos. I mean, it's like it's incredible what they did with this album, and you just keep on coming back for more because each song has this depth and complexity to it that, like, in the lyricism, I said it before, and I'll say I think Jesse Cash is not only the best Queen vocalist in the industry, but might be the best lyricist as well. I just love what they do with like their ethereal, otherworldly lyrics sometimes, but then they'll go into like something like Scorpion Hymn where they're just like saying screw you to everything. And JTKV blew me out of the water this album. He was sort of stuck in this shell. That shell is called Sumerian Records, by the way. But he was sort of in this shell of like not doing anything unique with his unqueens. Aside from, you know, Drift and Neon, he sort of kept this same tonality. This album, he really broke out and did some, you know, I mean, Scorpion Hymn, he does like essentially a death metal growl, and he brought out some of his higher pitched screams. He really impressed, and I mean, he even did some of the clean vocals. He really impressed me, and like, if this album is the framework for what Era is going to do in the future, that's just exciting, and it just means that there's hardly going to be any competition for number one album every 2 years, so that's exciting too. But obviously that leans into my number one song of 2021. There wasn't much of competition for this being my favorite song of 2021. That's Lunar Halo from the album. When you get Jesse Cash and Talkbox, it's hard to disagree with that. The song is just like this beautiful, again, ethereal, like floating through space, just incredible, fascinating lyricism, like otherworldly lyricism, all with this idea that you're like floating around a lunar halo. And like the song is, it's this combination of like, it's like relational, a concept of like a relationship, but it's like put in the concept of like space, which is like, it's extremely difficult to do, but they nailed it. It's just like all this fascinating stuff, like we navigate by the light of the stars, our grip may slip and we may drift apart, but if I screamed loud enough, I'm certain you would feel a ripple. Like that's the type of connection that, like, when you hear that lyric, it's like you can feel that connection. It's just like it's incredible what they did with this song to like bring that huge otherworldly theme into such a simple concept. And that's just like one of the many examples of why this album and the song Lunar Halo were, you know, my number one of the year.
All right, I'm just gonna get straight to the point because like Joseph, my number one is also Era's self-titled. For me, this one was locked pretty firmly in place at number one the whole year long. I don't think any album I listened to was even close to beating it out, honestly. Now, I had some strong 4.5 out of 5s, but Era's 5 out of 5 is a incredibly strong 5, like one of the strongest 5s I can possibly give. I, like Joseph, I agree that this sound was sort of a synthesis of their first 2 albums, along with their last 2 albums. It combines the sort of unpredictability and progressiveness of their first 2 albums, along with the more accessible and ironed out sound of their other 2 albums. And I think it creates sort of a perfect creation, because this is their tightest album, I feel like, musically, and it also has their most variation, which is something they were missing from their other albums. They take a lot of risks here, and I think every single risk pays off. Snowblood still remains to be one of my top 3 favorites on the album. It's classic Era, and it, while doing some new things, and it has one of their best breakdowns, and I love what that breakdown does in that song. And it also just does such a good job at establishing the themes for this album, and I really like the journey this album goes on, starting at probably one of the darkest places that Era has ever started, with just this oppressive bleakness of, like, this person being weighed down by their obsession with technology and with thinking negatively about the world around them because of it. And I mean, the darkness reaches some really, really low lows, I feel like, in places, but the lows work because of how Era delivers the message, such as on Gungrave, which is just an oppressive song with some just massive guitar riffs that I really liked, or Divisionary, which is has one of Era's best choruses, in my opinion. And usually I feel like when bands talk about technology, it can sometimes turn into eye rolling, because it's like, we've heard this before, but I think Era does it in a really interesting way. It reminds me of like early Black Mirror, the way they talk about it. They're doing clever things with their commentary. And Shadow Autonomous is incredible as well. I think probably one of the darkest moments on the album, and I really just like how it progresses. Yeah, there's just great excellent song after excellent song on here. Electric Twilight feels like it was inspired by the Drift part of Era. I really liked that one. Lunar Halo, that one comes in a very close second to Vanish Canvas for me. Like I said, I almost view those 2 as the most essential tracks on the album. And Memory Fiction brings like an entirely clean vocals song that I've always wanted from Era, and we finally get it, and it's just such a lovely way to end off the album. Also, Eidolon and Remnant are ones that aren't talked about nearly enough for what they do on the album as well. So yeah, pitch perfect album front to back. All 12 songs are incredible for what they do. It's just an all-around excellent album that's going to be hard to beat out. For next year, it's going to be hard to find an album that's as good as this one was. Now, my number one song. this is one of the few artists where they have made my #1 song of the year 2 times now, and that is the song Enlightenment by While She Sleeps. Yeah, their album was at all the way at the bottom for my top 10, so it's sort of interesting that a song by theirs goes all the way to the top. But what can I say? I can't resist these guys' sounds. It's just one of my favorite things out there. And I mean, this song has everything I love about the band, from the sort of crazy guitar work to Lawrence Taylor's incredible screams and Sean's incredible cleans, and the way they trade off is just so seamless and works very well. And of course, the lyrics about unity, except I think the album does something a little different with it this time around and addresses it in a more personal light. As the bridge says, there's something ingrained, something insatiable I can't betray, something so deep that the tide doesn't change. It's okay to not be okay. And I really liked that sort of reassurance that the band gave. I guess if there was one theme that sort of embodied this whole album, this whole list, actually, it would be like songs about reassuring people or taking people out of the darkest parts of themselves. I think that's something that's embodied a lot of the songs I've talked about. And this one does that theme the best, I feel like. And plus, it just includes all the unpredictability that I love from While She Sleeps, and just some mind-blowing guitar work that just... It blows me away every time I hear it. Yeah, I mean, I've talked about While She Sleeps several times, so there's not much I could say that would be beyond me repeating myself, but I think Enlightenment is one of their best songs, and I just really like the messages that it includes in it. Yeah, so easily my best song of the year.
Okay. We're going to take a real quick break. We'll be back in very shortly. Just going to get some drinks because hour and a half. Alrighty, we are back and in movies. So
Wait, talked about them very, very briefly.
Yeah,
I mentioned my top 10 very briefly.
I didn't even have a top 10 last year. I didn't even watch 10 movies last year. So this year we finally get to talk about top 10 movies. Albeit
I watched 140. That's the most I've watched ever.
I watched what would it be? 10% of that. But anyways, unfortunately the bottom half of my list is pretty weak. I know you do, but I don't watch I don't really do movies like on, you know, streaming stuff, unfortunately. That's just not my style. Everything that I have on here is from stuff that I saw in big theaters. So the bottom half of my list is unfortunately very weak. The top half of my list, though, is very top heavy and great stuff that will be talked about a lot. So I'll just start out with my number 10. Like I said, this is very weak stuff. So my number 10 is for a very it's a very strange number 10 because I looked at my stuff, only watched 15 movies. The bottom half is just very weak. So I'll just get right into it. My number 10 was Spiral. And I'll just talk about this movie briefly. It's not a number 10 I'm super proud of or glad that is my number 10. But I'm hoping, you know, next year is a little bit stronger for movies. This year was sort of like a hard reset for movies overall. But I thought, I mean, I'll just talk about it briefly. I thought it was a good detective thriller Saw movie. It had its weaknesses, obviously. I think it was like a 3 out of 5 for me. So a 3 being at the bottom of my number 10 is like really bad. So, but overall, so yeah, I think that's just all I'll pretty much say about it because my list is very top heavy with good stuff. So yeah.
Okay, so for my list, it's bound to change. I usually don't officially release my top 10 list until January, so there are some in my top 10 that may not make it. I think my top 5 are pretty set in stone, but some of my bottom half might not make it. But for now, I'm pretty happy with the list I have overall. And this year for movies, I don't know. I think it was a pretty good one. It was not as weird as 2020. I don't think 2020 my list was a little bizarre because I did do mostly streaming movies. And for that reason, I think my list this year is slightly more conventional in what it does and things like that. But nevertheless, my number 10 is a movie that I just saw this week. So this could be recency bias playing, but I also did really enjoy this movie, and it's Encanto. It is Disney's latest animated feature, and I do think it's one of their best non-Pixar animated flicks I've seen. It has a really interesting story of this Hispanic family who lives in this house that is literally alive. Like the house has can talk to the people. It doesn't ever physically talk, but it uses like its structure to talk to them and communicate with them and things like that. And everybody in the family has some sort of gift that they were granted by the father passing away after they were refugees. So there's some commentary about immigration in here as well. Each of them has a unique gift. So for an example, one of them has super strong, one of them is able to make flowers with just a simple command, one of them can hear literally anything from any direction, things like that. However, the main character does not have a gift, which makes her feel like she is sort of an outcast from the rest of the family, and she doesn't feel as special. And of course, this will make you think that, oh, this is going to be a very cheesy message of you don't need a gift to be special. And while that is sort of the direction the movie takes, I think it does it in a way that is not cheesy at all. It's actually very heartfelt, and I think is a really nice message that I think will especially be good for the younger audience, because a lot of our society now, especially, is like this idea that you have to be very talented at something in order to be recognized by people. And I appreciate that this movie is saying that, no, you don't necessarily need to have any type of gift. You are just fine the way you are as a person. I think the movie expresses that very well. And of course, the music here is also great. Lin-Manuel Miranda of Hamilton fame made the music for this. I feel like he's making the music for literally every Disney movie now, it seems. He did it for Moana and a couple others recently. And I think his music here is good, not as catchy as his stuff in Hamilton or even in Moana for that matter, but I think it's good. And I think the animation is great here as well, but that's sort of a given with Disney animated products at this point. So yeah, pretty solid movie overall.
Another quick and short explanation, but my number 9 movie still lies in the 3.5 now, I think, but it's Last Night in Soho. I mean, here's what I'll say. I love Edgar Wright. Most of his past stuff, especially thinking about Baby Driver, how I think that was like maybe my number 3 when it was out. Was that 2017? Yeah, I think that was in my top 3. If it wasn't, it would be now. Rewatching it multiple times. Just an addicting movie, minus Kevin Spacey, but we won't go there yet. But yeah, I really loved this movie overall. I mean, I'd never seen Thomasin McKenzie in anything before, so I think this was a really good introduction to her. She did a pretty solid job. Anya Taylor-Joy is just a delight to watch on screen. She's an excellent actress, and she's probably become one of my favorite actresses as of recent. And then David Smith, or Matt Smith, sorry. David Tennant, Matt Smith. Yeah. Doctor Who. Matt Smith. I love Matt Smith. I love him. Probably the most underrated Doctor. But in this movie, he shined and probably had my favorite performance of his. You could tell he was just having so much fun. I'd never really seen him as a villain before, so it was pretty cool to see him as a villain. And I personally think it actually suits him better. He has a really nice villain, sort of attire to himself to a certain extent. So, the movie just has this, the reason it's not any higher and the reason it's not really in my top even 5 Edgar Wright movies probably, it's just because it's just like it's so all over the place and half the story doesn't make sense, and then I love that Edgar Wright tried for a thriller, and I thought there were some really cool thriller parts, especially there's this part where like all the people who were killed in you have to watch the movie to understand there are a bunch of people who were killed. This is going into spoiler territory a little bit, but like they all appear as ghosts and start saying help me, and it's like this sort of anti-horror flick where like the ghosts sort of, you start feeling sorry for them to a certain extent, and I liked that, and I liked a lot of the themes and stuff like that. But it's just like I sometimes enjoy when films go all over the place like that, but I don't think it was quite done correctly. I would love to see him try another thriller and be better with it. I know this was actually a critically really overall acclaimed film, probably just because it has his name behind it, but it was a decent horror film, not a good Edgar Wright film, but I thought it was really, I mean, it had enough to be an enjoyable watch for sure. So yeah.
Okay, so for my number 9 pick, this one could go higher, but I'm being hesitant because I feel like my nostalgia goggles are on partly for this one, but I also can't deny how much I enjoyed this movie. It's Spider-Man No Way Home, or sorry, No Way Home. Yeah. Far From Home is the second one.
Almost. That's number 5.
Yeah. I mean, this movie has obviously gotten so much hype. All I can say is believe the hype. I think it is an excellent Spider-Man movie. Now, will I say that it is the best Spider-Man movie? No, I think there's 3 other Spider-Man movies that are better than it. But I think that this is still just, it's by far the best of the MCU Spider-Man movies for sure. Even though I still actually like Far From Home pretty well, I think this one takes the good stuff of Far From Home and improves on it even more. I mean, this movie has a lot going for it, a lot of appeal for multiple people. Are we going to go into spoilers for this? I mean, might as well. I feel like if you haven't seen it at this point, you're probably going to get it spoiled at some point with how many people have. I mean, if this movie is a crowd pleaser, I feel like. If you like the Andrew Garfield Spider-Man, you get that here. If you like the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man, you get that here. And you also get their respective villains. And of course, you get Tom Holland's Spider-Man as well. And I think it works. This movie had the danger of becoming a huge mess. I'm not going to lie, I was a little worried about it going in, that they were going to sort of take some of the iconic, especially Tobey Maguire villains, and sort of change them to be very MCU-like, and I was very worried about that, but they really don't. I think they really did an excellent job, particularly keeping the spirit of the Sam Raimi villains, especially Doc Ock and Green Goblin, really well. Alfred... well, yeah.
But yeah.
You know what I'm saying. Yeah, but... I mean, Alfred Molina, seeing him back was an absolute delight. He is a severely underrated actor, I feel like. And he was great here again as Doc Ock. I'm glad they didn't do what I was afraid they were going to do, which was make him, like, totally sort of evil or cracking every joke under the sun. But instead, they make him like he was in the second Spider-Man movie, and I really appreciated that. I think he was great here, and it made sense that he ended up helping the Spider-Mans out at the end of the movie. Willem Dafoe just kills it as Green Goblin. He reminded me again why Green Goblin is my favorite Spider-Man villain by a long shot. I loved that he was the main villain in this, and if anything, I wish there was a little more of him. I really liked how he interpreted the character in this one. I really liked that they emphasized on the sort of Jekyll and Hyde personality in this one. It was very much so emphasized. And yeah, there's a lot of other stuff to commend here as well. This is by far Tom Holland's best Spider-Man performance yet. I was already pretty sold on him in Far From Home and Endgame, but now I really do see why so many people consider him their favorite Spider-Man. Tobey Maguire will always reign supreme for me, but I really loved Tom Holland's performance in here. He really went there in the dark moments, which I appreciated. I appreciated that this movie had those heavy moments when the MCU doesn't always have those types of moments. And yeah, there's just so many great moments in here that I mean, I could spend a lot of time talking about them, but at the end of the day, this was just a really good Spider-Man film, and it just felt good to see so many nostalgic moments appearing up. I admit, it scratched that part of my brain, nostalgia brain, that I really have a hard time toning down.
This next movie, I'll fully admit, this might be a similar nostalgia goggles / just me being me sometimes. Or maybe it's just because I missed seeing just a purely fun movie, but my number 8 was Godzilla versus Kong. And I'll say this for many reasons. I loved Godzilla. I know a lot of people, I mean, critics hate these types of movies, and I mean, I see why. They're just ridiculous CGI fests all around. But I loved Godzilla, the King of the Monsters. I thought it was an excellently done movie. For being Godzilla. It was surprisingly touching, and I loved Kong too. I mean, I thought they were great, and this movie just brought them together, and it was just basically flashing lights and just having fun. I remember coming out of the theater and being like, I just had so much fun watching this movie. And there's a really great fight at the end, Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla, one of the classics. That's where nostalgia goggles sort of come in. It's like, it's just a classic thing that you just love to see sometimes. But overall, the film, I mean, you're not going to come home talking about the acting or the script or whatever, but it's like, you just got some great fight scenes, and that's pretty much the brunt of the movie and why it's my number 8.
Okay, so for my number 8, I am so glad that James Wan is back in the horror landscape again, because my number 8 goes to Malignant, his latest horror movie. When I saw that he was coming out with a horror movie again, my excitement could not be contained, because I feel like I said, the horror landscape has been missing his vision. I think he is probably... I mean, you've got your Stanley Kubricks and your Alfred Hitchcocks, who are probably objectively better, but I think he's my favorite horror director, if I'm being honest. I just love what he does. And when his sequels, when they don't have his mark on it, they noticeably become worse. So it was nice to see him back after a severely underwhelming Conjuring sequel this year, especially. And this movie is just absolutely insane. Where it goes, I did not expect him to make like a tribute to B horror movies, but that's essentially what he does here. And if you really think about it, it's almost a love letter to his past movies as well. There's moments here that tribute to every single other movie he's made. There's moments here that remind me of Insidious. There's moments here that remind me of The Conjuring, and there's moments in here that remind me of Saw. So once again, I feel like it's something that if you're a James Wan fan, you're really going to enjoy the sort of light references he makes to his past movies. And some of them I think are meant to be like references, literally. There's a scene here that I feel like was just a tribute to Insidious, and it can't be looked at any other way, in my opinion. And overall, I just think it was a fun movie. It was one that I had a great time watching. It may not be James Wan's scariest movie, but I think it does a good job at having fun with its scenes, and I think the way it transitions from sort of haunted house horror to action horror is pretty well done. And emphasis on the action horror part, I actually think that was a stronger part of this. When it just goes off the rails, this movie really picks up, in my opinion. And there is a twist in this, of course, and I was sort of expecting some kind of twist with how this main character was acting, but the way they deliver the twist was not the way I was expecting it to be delivered, and it's a lot of fun. So, yeah, this was overall just a horror movie that I really enjoyed, and I just hope James Wan creates more in the future.
Yeah, shout out to James Wan. Molina isn't in my top 10, but that's a definite little honorable mention for sure. My number 7 is a movie we saw recently, very recently. I came out of the theater. You know, it's one of those movies. I think. My number 7. I'll start out by saying it's Nightmare Alley. And you come out of the theater, your first impression's always there. Del Toro movies do this thing to you where you keep on thinking about them and you can't stop thinking about them, and then you can't stop thinking about them again. This was that movie. I didn't like Shape of Water. But Nightmare Alley, it has this really, really I think the reason it ended up being in my top 10 over some other movies was just how strong the first sort of, I guess, third of the movie is. It opens with this really, really awesome circus vibe, with some of the best, you know, almost theater-like set work that Del Toro is known for. That was severely missing in Shape of Water, that this movie brought back, was sort of that, you know, classic old school, what would have been considered back in the day horror vibes, you know, like the circus vibes. That part just absolutely was incredible, and I just kept on thinking about it. I was like, that part, the opening third was just so incredible. It's just like, Bradley Cooper doesn't say a word in like the first third, and he was probably, unfortunately, the weakest link of the movie. But the first third, just in its concept and its execution of like, just like introducing the world and stuff like that, and it's another movie with Willem Dafoe, so it's gonna, you know, he always does good work. So that's where it is. And then you know, just incredible performances overall. Why I'm blanking on some actors' names from the movie, I don't know. I'm horrible at remembering this type of stuff. I have a few particular performances aside from Willem Dafoe, including, and not limited to, I'm stalling to open my Twitter, just give me 1 second, Cate Blanchett. I didn't forget her name. She's one of my favorite actresses from Lord of the Rings. Anyways, she did a great job. One of her best performances. She sort of plays this, you know, an evil, you know, dame, you know, this sort of, she's sort of like a physical metaphor almost for, like, you know, noir, classic noir films. Unfortunately, the middle half of the film is where it incredibly falls off, just sort of starts looping on itself almost, but then the ending really packs a heavy punch, that it pays off. Like, that's what I love about this film, is it's like it pays off on what it started with. So I won't spoil it because it's a recent movie and it's a pretty crazy twist, but like it definitely pays off on what you expect from like a Del Toro movie. So yeah.
Okay, at number 7 for me is a movie that I'm sure is going to be in the running for some Oscars when this time comes, because it has that vibe of an Oscar season movie. And I think it does deserve to be in the running. And this is Spencer is what it's called. It is about Diana Spencer, who was part of the royal family, and who died in a car crash. Although some people theorize that the royal family had something to do with her dying because of how different she was from the royal family. She was, of course, known for being very different from the rest of the family. People called her more real, more like genuine, and based on the footage I've seen of her, I think she did seem like a pretty genuine and good person. And when the HIV and AIDS epidemic was happening, she was actually pretty pivotal in taking away a lot of the stereotypes, negative stereotypes associated with it, like when she touched a person who had HIV and she didn't get it. Like one of the theories was that HIV was contagious when it really wasn't, in that way at least. But this movie specifically, it does an interesting thing. I thought the movie was going to be focusing on the moments leading up to her death, but it actually really doesn't. It sort of focuses on just the small 3 days in time where it's like during Christmas and Boxing Day, and she is sort of just going through and dealing with being a part of the royal family. And it turns into almost a horror movie by the end, which was not what I was expecting. I thought it was just going to be like a biopic about Spencer chronicling her life, but it's really not. It's more like just a deep character study. And there's probably some interpretive liberties taken here that may not be accurate to her, but I think it's interesting to think about. Like, there's some scenes where she compares herself to Anne Boleyn, who was someone that was killed by King George VIII, and she sort of has this feeling that she's going to be the next Anne Boleyn, and she's going to get assassinated by the royal family, and her paranoia is really played up really well. Also, this movie just looks gorgeous. It is one of the most beautiful looking movies I've seen, and of course it helps that it's taken place in a royal castle, but it just looks incredible, and the way it's shot, it's like it's almost taken place in a dream. And Spencer looks out of place in this dream, which I think is a purpose, that she's out of place in the royal family. Also, Spencer's played by Kristen Stewart, who is in the Twilight series. And it seems as though I'm going to be having to do a reevaluation on Kristen Stewart like I did on Robert Pattinson, because she is incredible here, and I've heard that she's good in other movies as well. I haven't really seen her in much, so I've always negatively associated her with Twilight, which is not fair, apparently, because she is really good in this, just gives an excellent performance, and she basically disappears into the role of Diana. Also, the guy who plays Wormtail / Peter Pettigrew in Harry Potter is in this, and he is excellent. He plays a really menacing role that I really enjoyed. So overall, this was a pretty great movie that I really enjoyed. I'm always a sucker for movies about like royalty and with this sort of visual vibe to them, so this was a really great watch.
All right, my number 6 is sadly this was another pathetically bad year for horror. So I only had one horror movie on my list, but it is a very strong horror movie. It is A Quiet Place Part 2. John Krasinski, A Quiet Place Part 1 was absolutely mind-blowingly incredible. One of the best horror movies around. And the second one is, if A Quiet Place is Alien, then A Quiet Place Part 2 is Aliens. And for me, that means it's a little bit weaker, but it's still good. I think the cast, the core cast is still really good. Emily Blunt is pretty solid in anything she does. Cillian Murphy was personally my favorite part. I think he gets memed around way too much, and I think he's a great actor. But I really enjoyed him, and I think the more action horror vibe to the movie is really well achieved and accomplished in this movie. But the movie also keeps the DNA of the first one with like some really well done suspense scenes. It still uses the lack of audio. This movie has a lot more audio, talking audio, whatever sounds. It does a really good job when the movie just explodes into audio. It does a really good job of just like this slow build up with like some really awesome action sequences to match up, and it keeps the enemies scary. And one thing I love about A Quiet Place, there's a little more of an indication of where the enemies come from, but I love that it still keeps them a mystery. Like, if there's a part 3, which I think the ending potentially suggests there will be, is that I still like that they're a mystery, and I love when horror movies keep villains a mystery forever. It won't happen. The third one will probably, reveal it, but I really enjoy it overall. And I think John Krasinski, for where he came from, is potentially a really solid candidate for directing other horror IPs in the future. So yeah.
All right, at my number 6 is a movie simply titled Pig. That's literally all it is. And this movie has Nicolas Cage in it. And that is always an interesting formula. You don't ever know what Nicolas Cage you're going to get. Are you going to get the Nicolas Cage that is crazy and over the top? Are you going to get the Nicolas Cage that is horrible? Or are you going to get a Nicolas Cage that actually puts on a really good performance? Because yes, Nicolas Cage can be a really good actor. It just depends on what type of performance you're getting from him and how enthusiastic he is about the particular movie he's doing. And in this one, we do thankfully get what actually might be my favorite performance by him I've ever seen. And I've seen him in some pretty good movies recently, but his performance in this one is just really good. Structurally, this movie sounds like it's going to be very John Wick-like. Nicolas Cage's character, named Robin, owns this truffle hunter pig, who, of course, as it sounds like, takes him and helps him hunt for truffles. And apparently truffles are really valuable in this world, and apparently in real life there's actually a pretty aggressive market for them in some parts of the world, especially in the cooking world. So this pig is obviously very vied for, and eventually the pig is stolen, and so Nicolas Cage sets out to retrieve his pig. And it sounds like a John Wick revenge story, like where in John Wick his dog was stolen and he goes out hunting the people who took his dog. But actually, this movie is sort of anti-John Wick because it chooses the non-violent route many times. And Robin himself, you get the impression through very subtly revealed details that he used to be a violent and angry person, but that he sort of left that part of his life behind, especially during dealing with the sorrow of losing his wife at a far too young age. And the way the movie navigates this idea of loss is pretty powerful. For a very simple and almost silly sounding plot of a guy going after his beloved pig, it turns very emotional very quickly. And it actually has a lot of interesting, like, world building in it of this cooking world of, like, they embody this world of professional chefs as like a vicious kill or be killed world, which I was not expecting. It's very interesting and creates an interesting vibe to this movie. And also Nicolas Cage's relationship with this other character, Amir, played by Alex Wolff, who was also in Hereditary, is really interesting as well. I really like the relationship built between them two. And this movie does not go where you're expecting it, in my opinion. It doesn't really give you the solution that you necessarily wanted, but it was the solution that I think this movie needed. It really ends it off in a much more interesting and, I feel like, more powerful way than where I thought it was originally going to go. It upends your expectations each time, and I really like that. It does it very well. And yeah, the biggest highlight of this movie is Nicolas Cage's performance, one of my favorite performances of the year.
All right, going into top fives. My number 5 is last year I think it was, so this year, second year in a row where a superhero movie is in my top 5, and this time it's Spider-Man No Way Home. No Way Home. So the thing with this movie is it'll probably move out once I watch more movies that were from this year that I missed out on. But the nostalgia goggles were really crazy for this one. But the movie really, Marvel can be hit or miss, very hit or very miss a lot of times. This movie was a huge hit. I loved everything about it. My main worry going into it was that, it was similar to what James said about, like, were they going to use the villains that Doc Ock is my favorite Spider-Man villain, just from especially of Alfred Molina's performance in Spider-Man 2. He's always been my favorite since I watched that one, and I was worried that they were gonna mess it up. I went into the movie hoping he would be the main villain, but it made sense what they did with him to make him a good guy and then make Green Goblin a bad guy, because Green Goblin was just always bad from beginning to end, whereas Doc Ock did turn good at the end of Spider-Man 2, so it made sense. a lot of really great stuff about this movie. Like James said, I think I agreed that like I may not have been extremely sold on Tom Holland with the first two movies, but for me this was his really breakout performance overall. And even though I'll second what James said, and you know, Tobey Maguire will always be the best Spider-Man. I think he did a really great job, especially as Peter Parker. You know, for a Spider-Man movie, it's actually mostly Peter Parker who Tom Holland is playing. And he does a really great job with all the moments that are like Peter Parker, whether it's just being awkward or getting really serious. And this movie does sort of copy the tone of Sam Raimi, where it's like it's way darker. It's like the Endgame Infinity War levels of dark that like you don't really expect Marvel to do, but they do when you least expect it. So it was a really, really surprising and very, very optimistically surprising movie that was like, you know, you just don't expect Marvel to do what they do sometimes, but then they do it and it's like, well, they did it again and they got me interested in Marvel again. So it's like, it's really awesome what they did with this movie. And but everything else James said, I'll just sort of mirror and just leave it there.
Okay, at number 5 is a Netflix original called The Mitchells versus the Machines. This was made by the iconic duo of Phil Lord and Chris Miller, who have also made the Lego Movie and Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. So this movie was going to be a pretty easy shoo-in for my list, I thought, and thankfully it was. These guys never really make bad movies, in my opinion. They always make great products. And this one is also great. It's not as good as Lego Movie or Into the Spider-Verse, but it's still a really great movie. It still includes a lot of the strengths of this directing duo, like the very creative animation that has just a lot of personality to it. I really like how creative the animation is in this movie. It gives off this comic book flair, which matches the main characters' vibes, especially as she is someone who is passionate about comics and is also creating short films that have like a comic book feel to them. So the movie replicating her personality visually was just a really creative choice that I really enjoyed. And story-wise, I think this movie is really fun. It takes place in where these robots are taking over the world, and so this family, this just random family, has to fight against them while also dealing with their own inner family problems and conflicts and things like that. And these two seemingly different and potentially not interconnected plots actually come together way better than they probably have any right to, and that's just because these directors know how to make a product like this work very well, and they know how to balance all the characters and give them all equal screen time and give them all the time they need to develop. The voice acting throughout this is great. Danny McBride is really fun as Rick, the father. Maya Rudolph, who is a great comedian, is fun as the mother, Linda. And Abby Jacobson is great as Katie Mitchell, the main character, who is a very fun character to follow along with. This movie is also, of course, very funny. Lots of jokes coming at you constantly. But probably my favorite part is where they have the scene where Furbies come to life and attack them, and then they have this huge monster Furby that attacks them. And it is one of the funniest things I've seen all year. This is my favorite animated movie of the year by far, and I think it should win Best Animated Film, but it probably won't, unfortunately. Still, great movie and a lot of fun to watch.
All right, my number 4 is a movie that I really genuinely did not expect to make it up this far on the list, but here we are. I think you'll probably be genuine. This might be the most surprising one on my list. It's The Suicide Squad. And here's what I'll say. I love James Gunn. The Guardians of the Galaxy movies are awesome. It's hard to say. It's a little bit, it's like a tad bit under the first Guardians of the Galaxy, but I loved this movie. I think James Gunn is just incredible, and I'm glad he's back for Guardians 3. But we'll talk about Suicide Squad a little bit. This movie is just, I don't know, it's just out of the park insanity from beginning to end. It's just, if you get the vibes from the trailers, but you got to watch the movie to really understand how just absolutely all over the place insane this movie is. I'm actually pulling up because the because yeah, I mean, it was a really I think obviously the shining star of, you know, Suicide Squad nowadays is Margot Robbie. She's just an excellent Harley Quinn. Couldn't think of a more perfect fit for Harley. um Surprisingly, the one person that they're bringing back that I'm very excited for is John Cena as Peacemaker.
Yeah.
Now, here's what I'll say about John Cena. Didn't expect to like him as anything aside from just being a hilarious meme, but he actually put on a really solid performance as Peacemaker. He had some genuinely hilarious moments, especially in that village where that village was just incredibly well done and hilarious. This movie just had some of the best comedic moments, and it's DC, and I feel like, you know, you can say they took a little tidbits here and there from Marvel, but I feel like they made their own little brand of dark comedy to a certain extent. And if you think of the Suicide Squad, you think a dark comedy fits perfectly, and it just does. Idris Elba is a fantastic blood sport, but he doesn't really act badly ever. So I really love the movie overall, and I'm trying to find this freaking yes, Joel Kinnaman. I love Joel Kinnaman. One of my favorite actors, and he puts on a pretty solid performance as well. I think it just had a really solid baseline cast, and I think the movie overall, you know, it's just hilarious. You're just dying all the time. It's just like so funny, so well directed and accomplished, and yeah, that's pretty much that.
Okay, my number 4 pick. This one stayed pretty high on my list all throughout the year, even though it came out pretty early on, and I'm glad it stayed up there because it deserves it. It's A Quiet Place Part 2 for me. I still like the first A Quiet Place better, but I do think this one was a very good sequel. I was a little worried that it would lean a little too much into the action horror, like Joseph said, but I actually think it did a pretty good job at balancing it out with some legitimately tense moments. I appreciate that John Krasinski still films some scenes where you just feel like you have to hold your breath, with how like nail-bitingly intense it is in some parts. There's especially this part where the characters are hiding out and they're in this bunker, and they're basically going to die in there because they're on limited oxygen, and the baby is in there with them, which makes the tension go up even higher. And it's just one of the most well done build-ups of tension I've seen in a horror movie this year. Performances all around are great. I think Cillian Murphy was superb in this. He did an excellent job. Emily Blunt was great. I wish she had been in the movie a little more, if I'm honest. She had a more minor role than I was expecting, but I always really liked whenever she appeared. Millicent Simmons also does great in this once again. I appreciate the representation of someone who is actually deaf. Like I said, I thought that was a really cool thing they did in the first movie. It gives the performance obviously more authenticity because the person is actually deaf. And once again, she's great here. I think Noah Jupe really comes into his own in this movie as well. I already enjoyed him in the first one, but I think he did even better in this one and had some very strong moments. And it was cool to see John Krasinski in here very briefly at the beginning for the flashback scene. I will say that is the one element of this movie that I feel like was missing. I wish they hadn't killed him off in the first, but I understand he just wanted to do his directing duties and everything like that. Now, to be honest, I'm not sure if they're going to be able to replicate this trick again for the third movie, but they did very well here, so I am slightly, sort of optimistic, but I won't be have super high expectations or anything. Still, this was a really great horror movie.
My top three is incredibly top heavy. These three were movies that all had an incredibly high emotional filmmaking impact on me from someone who is a filmmaker. These were all three movies that I consider to be some of the top tier stuff in recent times. My number 3 is Judas and the Black Messiah. What a movie. What a movie. This is one of the first movies in a long time with like a really explicit, political message that I watched and enjoyed. Shaka King, I'd never heard of him before, but I'm pretty sure he's done more stuff. So, always interested to see new directors, but like this movie is highlighted and, really, really banks on its main cast. Daniel Kaluuya has been one of my favorite actors since Get Out. I think he is absolutely phenomenal. Lakeith Stanfield put on a really, really solid performance. I think he probably was my favorite part of it. And then you get someone like Jesse Plemons, one of the probably the most underrated actor at this current time. He does not get enough recognition for how incredible of an actor he is. Someone who I was introduced to from Black Mirror. He just keeps on getting better and better, and this was one of his best performances. And he's just such a menacing villain. He just plays especially in this one, he plays a very, very menacing villain, but not in like the traditional villain way. It's just like you look at the theme of this movie, the Black Panthers, all the stuff surrounding that. It's just like there's a different sort of menace to his character that's like very disturbing, but yet it serves a purpose at the same time, and that's one of the best parts of this movie. It serves a purpose, especially being released this year, one of the better years for a movie like this to be released and just be a huge eye-opener. And like it was just an incredibly well directed, well thought out movie overall.
I have a feeling that our top 3 is going to be pretty similar, just in a slightly different order for us. But my number 3 goes to The Green Knight. This movie was just a mind-bending experience. A fantasy is a genre that I feel like is sadly dying out in movies because they are insanely expensive to make. And also, it sadly seems like audiences are not really gravitating towards fantasy as much anymore, which is a shame because it's honestly one of my probably my favorite genre of movie. And this movie brought back fantasy, and I loved it. It was so great. And I think it did really interesting stuff and did some commentary on fantasy, sort of meta commentary that I think worked really well. It upends a lot of the fantasy tropes you expect in sort of a Game of Thrones fashion, and I really appreciated that. The asterisk being there when Game of Thrones was good, like that style of Game of Thrones, not season 8 style. And it tells a very unconventional fantasy story too. Honestly, one of the hardest fantasy stories to tell, in my opinion. Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. Like, that is not an easy story to tell. I've read that one before, and it is weird. It is weird, weird, weird. And this movie embraces the weirdness to great effect, I think. It even adds in some stuff to make it weirder, which I fully welcome, and I think it does pretty well. I think it tells its story very well, and it paces it great. Dev Patel puts on perhaps my favorite performance of the year, if I'm being honest, or one of my top 3 as Gawain. He is superb in this and really embodies the emotions that this character needs, and he does a great job of embodying the character arc of someone who is very naive and arrogant to someone who is much more wizened by the end of the movie. This movie, you think about it long after it's over and all the things it's trying to say and all the different lessons it's trying to teach as Gawain encounters all these different characters, and it's very interesting what he learns from each character. There's other great performances in here as well. Joel Edgerton, severely underrated actor, I feel, is great in this, and he's once again a part I wish I'd been in it longer, but I really loved what he did in this, and he was very interesting. Sean Harris as King Arthur, oh my gosh, he was a close second for me in this. I really loved how they portrayed Arthur in this movie. It was something that just was awesome to see. And I appreciate that they didn't tell you who characters were. They let you sort of figure it out. Like, you watch the movie, and then for a couple minutes later, you're like, oh, that was Merlin, and they didn't have to tell you, because just through visual cues. I thought that was really cool. And the ending of this movie, man, it is one of the most impactful endings I have seen all year long. Part of the ending plays out almost entirely silently, as it's going through Gowan seeing what his future could look like if he makes a certain decision, and it is incredible to watch. My mouth was hanging open. And then there's the immediate gut punch of the actual ending, which really makes this movie hit home for me. This was just incredible, and it was nice to see fantasy being taken seriously again in the theater.
Spoiler alert, Green Knight is my number 2. Wow, incredible. Yeah, I'll just sort of extend and maybe elaborate slightly more why this movie was number 2. I mean, I said it already with, Trivium's album, but I already love fantasy. Lord of the Rings is my favorite trilogy of all time. Return of the King, my favorite movie of all time. And I'll just start with agreeing with you. Like, seeing fantasy being taken serious on the big screen again was incredible. You just love to see when, like, and from a studio like A24 to make a fantasy movie, it's just like, they're gonna do something interesting with it, and they're gonna take it seriously. And A24 is just like, they were not the studio I would have pinpointed immediately to do a fantasy movie, but when you see what something like The Green Knight is, you understand why they do it. It's like, it's one of the riskier fantasy movies to make, because it's like, it's not a story people really know or frankly care about for the most part, but it's one of the more interesting and intriguing movies, especially when you were talking about like what lessons you learn from it, and stuff like that. I do agree with you. Like, I think Dev Patel was an incredible choice for Gowan. He put on an amazing performance, really brought some depth to a character that not a lot of people would know about. And I agree, Joel Edgerton is just awesome. He played a really great role too. And I just, there were some parts in there that were just like so fascinating. And it's like, what do they mean? It's like the craziest part about it is like, you're left after leaving the movie like, what does all of this mean? That's what A24 movies do so well, is like doing the more mysterious endings and more mysterious concepts so well. And this movie just executed on some really strange adventures in a really solid and well thought out way. And I don't know, it was just it was and like you said, the ending was just a crazy gut punch, and like one of the probably my favorite movie sequence of the year. Just that whole ending sequence, and then you just get punched in the face at the ending when it's like the reality hits, and it's like, oh, you learned your lesson, so either way you're screwed. So it's like, it's a fascinating movie overall. I absolutely adored The Green Knight. It's gonna climb in my favorite movies very quickly the more I watch it, for sure.
And my number 2 pick, like I said, we're going to have very similar lists at this point, but my number 2 pick is Judas and the Black Messiah. Yeah, this was a movie that I wish had come out in 2020, but I'm glad I got to see it nevertheless. I was afraid it was never going to come to fruition with how often it was getting scheduled back and back and back, but finally got to see it, and it is superb. Yeah, Shaka King is an excellent director. This is his first major movie debut. He has made other things before, but this is his first major movie debut, and he really made quite the statement here. I just think this is a very culturally relevant movie right now, and it's really deserved all the accolades it's gotten. I think it gives some really important messages and sort of upends a lot of the negative stereotypes that have been associated with the Black Panthers, primarily for racially motivated reasons, I would say, and Shaka King instead shows them in a different light that I think is really important to show what they really were like, and just show them in a more factual lens. All around, this was just a very well done movie. Performances were great. Lakeith Stanfield is an excellent actor that only gets better with every movie he's in. I think he is someone who is just really good at disappearing into whatever role he plays, and he plays a very complicated character here, one that you sometimes feel for, but you also can't help but hate for how much of a rat he is, for how he's constantly deceiving Fred Hampton, and how he's working with the enemy essentially throughout. But the movie also does a good job at making you understand his motivations and why he's doing this, making him a very interesting character. And he almost debatedly becomes a main character in interesting ways with how they're developing him. But that doesn't mean that there aren't other great performances in here. Daniel Kaluuya is great as Fred Hampton. If you watch clips of him and Fred Hampton side by side, it's uncanny how good he is at embodying this inspiring person. And he just really kills it. And he deserves all the accolades he's gotten as well. He's incredible, and you just feel inspired whenever you hear him talk. He is excellent. And yeah, Jesse Plemons is a perfect villain. He has basically shoehorned himself into this role, but I think he enjoys it so much that he doesn't care. He just loves, you can tell he enjoys playing these types of characters, and he does a good job at embodying them. And the way he works off Lakeith Stanfield is just great. Their scenes together are excellent. And there's just so many well-directed moments in here. The church scene where all three of our main characters are together in one room is one of the best directed sequences I've seen in recent memory. The tension is just so high, and you can just feel that something is about to break, and it's just incredible to watch. Yeah, this is an excellent movie that, yeah, I'm sure I'm going to be thinking about for many years to come.
So number one movie of the year. Think. I think it's gonna have to be Dune, probably. Yeah, it's probably Dune. It's Dune.
Yeah, it's Dune.
Where do you even start? 4 years ago, Denis Villeneuve created a masterpiece known as Blade Runner 2049. 4 years later, he created another masterpiece known as Dune. Denis Villeneuve is the voice of sci-fi in the industry right now. As you know, you got J.J. Abrams, who hasn't really done much recently. You know, I mean, Ridley Scott is just about as close as you're gonna get right now. But Denis Villeneuve is, you know, Dune is one of those generational movies that is never going to be forgotten. I'll start out by saying, if they complete the trilogy, which it seems like they will based on the success of this movie, this trilogy has the potential to be as culturally relevant as something like Star Wars, in my opinion, or even, I will not put it to Lord of the Rings yet, but it could. But this movie, it's sort of the same with what we were talking about with The Green Knight, in my opinion. You know, finally making a serious sci-fi movie that like has serious lore, world building, and all that type of stuff. You know, this movie picks up all the pieces that the new Star Wars trilogy missed. Being serious, having real, honest stakes, and even though it does, even though it is based on, you know, a book trilogy, it's already there. Denis Villeneuve's vision for sci-fi is unmatched. I love the sort of, I don't know, there's a lot of scenes that just feel like, you know, Game of Thrones, when Game of Thrones was good, asterisks, type of stuff, especially when, you know, Paul and his dad go to the other world, and meet that giant crowd. It's just like, there's so much interest. Like, you read up on it, you know, after the movie, there's always people will be like, after the movie, you need to read the books. It's like, I mean, I read up a little bit on what the lore is, and it's like, there's so much, it's almost creepy how identical to Game of Thrones the sort of lore and intrigue of the movie is. All the houses and all the other worlds and the relationships that are being built. It's so complex, but yet Villeneuve just makes it so beautifully simplistic, but you're watching the movie and there's all the complexities there. And you know, it wasn't there was no, like, you know, Blade Runner cinematography, but it was an excellent it was another movie that just Villeneuve has a vision for, and he delivered tenfold. Just like the visual style, it's like you got the main planet, which is just like, it's this gorgeous empty desert that's just like, and you know, the sort of main central area is like this awesome looking, like almost modern, looks sort of like, I don't know, Egyptian almost. It's like modern Egyptian sort of architecture. But you know, there's a lot of stuff here that's really good, and I'm actually gonna pull up my cast because so 1 second. And I mean, you just got to give a shout out to Hans Zimmer too, and just an excellent soundtrack, excellent. You know, you don't see him do sort of synth style music, but he clearly he has proven at this point that he can just about do any sort of soundtrack. And the vibe, when you look at the visuals on the screen matched with the soundtrack, it's just this really incredibly futuristic, and like you get those real like sci-fi, like otherworldly vibes. And it's just like, it's like Dune is weird. It's a weird movie. It's like all over the place with its stuff, but like Villeneuve just makes it feel like a believable place that could exist in our future. Just starting at the top, I guess, Timothée Chalamet. I've always been impressed with him, but this was not even competition for me, his best performance. As Paul Atreides, you know, he just puts on an excellent showing. Zendaya, I've just been consistently impressed by. She's just very consistent as an actress overall. Oscar Isaac is a really great actor again. Jason Momoa got way too little screen time for how well he did. But I think I really have to highlight, and I'm a little bit of a sucker for good villains, but I have to highlight Stellan Skarsgård here. I think he was probably my favorite performance in the movie, and he did an excellent job as the villain Vladimir. And it's just like the villain is in, again, Dune is just weird. The villain in Dune is such a bizarre villain, and yet Stellan Skarsgård is just like an incredible actor, and he just puts on such a demanding performance. Every time he's on screen, you just feel that evil presence always. And I don't know, it just feels good to have like a sci-fi trilogy to really be looking forward to, that's like, you know, it's going to be well done every time, and it's going to be like serious lore every time. It's like the movie does end abruptly, and it's just painful when it ends, because like, you know, you just want more. And that's just like, that's the mark of just an excellent trilogy that's going to be incredible for years to come.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with everything that Joseph said. Yes, my number one is also Dune. I don't have a whole lot to add, really. I mean, this movie just... Denis Villeneuve is perhaps the most reliable director out there in terms of producing quality. His weakest movie to me is a 7 out of 10, which is still a good movie. So at this point, I think I can safely say he's probably my favorite director. Christopher Nolan has been that for a while, but I think Denis Villeneuve has made at least 3 movies now that I consider to be nearly perfect. Or perfect. Dune is not a movie I've given a 5 out of 5 quite yet, but I'm always leaning close to giving it that because it is so freaking good. It is a masterfully done sci-fi epic, and there's just so much to appreciate about it. Yeah, Timothée Chalamet is great in this. I think he has a lot to work with. He has so much screen time. He's constantly there pretty much, and he just does a great job with what he's given. Rebecca Ferguson is also excellent in this, and I like that they focus on this mother-son relationship. It's not usually a dynamic that is focused on a whole lot, and especially sci-fi, I feel like, so it was interesting to see that focused on in this one, and that made it very unique. Oscar Isaac was excellent, albeit with too little screen time, in my opinion. And actually, Jason Momoa was the one that ended up being my favorite. I was not expecting that, but he put so much charm into his performance, and he was so criminally likable, and he had some of the coolest action sequences in the movie. And speaking of the action sequences, I mean, wow, they're just incredible in this. I like that Denis Villeneuve doesn't go for like obvious spectacle, because often he's focusing on the people in the action, and then the action is like happening in the background, but it's still incredible. It's just the way he does it is very unique and cool. I feel like in later Dune movies we'll get more of a focus on the action, but I like that it was a subtle buildup in this one. And I mean, the effects in this are just mind-blowing. You feel the cost of this movie in every scene, which is why I'm so thankful that it got back its money to make a sequel, because it deserves it. The worm in this, one of the coolest visual things I've ever seen. It was so cool. And yeah, like Joseph said, I'm glad they're taking a sci-fi movie seriously again. I've gotten a little tired of the jokey ones that have been dominating our landscape, so it's nice to see one that has like deep lore that it cares about, and also seems to be heading down the path of sort of being a meta commentary on sci-fi genre, and especially like the white savior trope, which I think the book also is a commentary on. Like, this character, he's someone who seems like he's going to save humanity, but he actually doesn't. So I'm expecting a very dark turn for this series. I mean, it's already sort of like that. Not very, a pretty bleak movie overall, but I think it does a good job with it. And yeah, the soundtrack can't be denied here. Hans Zimmer creates an incredible, impeccable atmosphere here that really just lifts this movie to new heights. Yeah, this is incredible. Another great accomplishment from Mr. Villeneuve.
Yeah, I mean, for when you look at a number one movie for the year, I think this is our. In 2017, we had Blade Runner. I don't remember what your number one for 2018 was. Did we have the same one that year too? Because we had the same one for 2019.
For 2018.
Because I'm curious now. Because I know 2017 we had Blade Runner. 2019 was
2019 was Parasite.
Parasite, yeah. Parasite, yeah.
2020 we had.
Yeah.
20
27
Blade Runner. 2018 I had 8.
Cool.
I don't know what you.
What would my number one have been? Oh god, I never make my physical lists.
I don't know what your number. I don't think you're number one. I know Spider-Man was.
No,
but
yeah, Spider-Man was really up there, but
that
number
wasn't.
one.
But then,
What the heck? Watching. I want to listen. We only did top 10 albums podcast.
and I forgot how strong.
2017 was
Blade Runner,
War for the
Planet
Planet.
of the Apes, Get
Get
Out,
Out,
It
Dunkirk.
Comes at Night.
It
What
Comes
is-
at Night was probably my. Yeah, that was
Yeah,
a crazy year.
That was such a good.
And Baby Driver. Gosh.
Oh, you went
Brawl?
before me.
You're talking about.
I was talking about it.
How long did you talk about
I
this?
don't
Lord.
know.
For 10 minutes.
That doesn't help.
Was it Alpha?
Alpha. Oh, I remember. Yes, I remember. Yep.
Oh my gosh, Alpha.
Man.
Oh, that was such a good movie.
I've never actually.
You have to see it. Oh my gosh, that was such a good movie. Dude, yeah. Oh yeah. That was such a good movie. Holy crap. I forgot about that. Wow. That was 2018.
Man.
All right, anyways, we've gone on. Anyways, yeah, that is going to be all for our critical podcast 2021. Finally back to normal for both things. So, as usual, we'll be back next year, and we'll be back until we're both dead or something. I don't know.
Probably.
Or until YouTube dies. But anyways, that is going to be all for our critical podcast of 2021. Thank you for everyone who joined, whether you were lurking or everyone lurking. So yeah, that is going to be all she wrote for this year. I will be streaming another time this week, probably tomorrow. So yeah, but that is